On your knees, pick it up. Master trainer. Captain Grant Whitlock had already torn her certification packet down the middle and thrown the halves in her face. Now he stood over her close enough that spit hit her cheek. 40 soldiers watching, waiting to see if she'd bend. Sergeant First Class Nora Bishop, 44 years old, 25 years in, did not move. Say it louder, Whitlock shouted. I want this whole formation to hear the funniest lie ever told on this base. They laughed, all of them. Not one of them knew her real record was sealed by the Defense Intelligence Agency or that she couldn't say a word about it for 9 more weeks. Before we go on, if you enjoy stories about the people everyone underestimates, subscribe to the channel and stay with me all the way to the end, because this one turns in ways you will not see coming. And drop the name of the city you're watching from in the comments so I can see how far this story travels. Her name was Elena Reyes. She was 49 years old, 5'4", and she had been on Fort Whitmore for exactly 9 days. She bent down. She picked up the paper ball. She unfolded it slowly, smoothing it flat against her thigh, taking her time about it the way a person does when they've decided not to be rushed by anybody. Then she set it back on the counter and turned it around so it faced him. It needs a signature, she said, not an opinion. The room made a sound, not laughter, something smaller and more nervous, the sound 43 people make when they realize something just happened and they don't know yet what it was. Kowalski's face changed. He'd been enjoying himself. Now he wasn't. Say that again. The form needs a signature, Elena said, watching. Lock 14, you're the approving authority for the range allocation. I'm requesting range 3 Thursday 0600 to 0900. That's it. That's the whole thing. Range 3 is for qualified instructors. I'm the new instructor. You're a contractor, Kowalski said, and he let the words sit there like something he'd scraped off his boot. You're a civilian body they hired to check a box because somebody in an office in Virginia decided our marksmanship numbers looked bad on a spreadsheet. You're not an instructor. You're a line item. Somebody in the back said, damn, under their breath. Elena didn't move. She had her hands folded in front of her, and she looked at Kowalski the way you look at weather, not hostile, not afraid, just noting it. Block 14, she said. Fort Whitmore sat in the dry part of the state where the wind came off the flats and put a fine coat of grit on everything, and it had been there since 1943, and every man on it acted like he'd been there since 1943 too. It was an infantry training installation. It made soldiers. It had made soldiers for 80 years, and the people who ran it did not believe there was anything about making soldiers they needed to learn from anybody. And they especially did not believe it about a 49-year-old woman who showed up in a rented sedan with one duffel bag and a folder of paperwork. The paperwork was thin. That was the first thing people noticed. Corporal Danny Ruiz worked in the S1 shop, which meant personnel, which meant he was the one who processed her in-brief on day 1, and he was the one who noticed. He told his buddy about it over lunch, and his buddy told somebody else, and by day 3, it was all over the base. Her file's empty, Danny said. I'm not kidding. Name, date of birth, contractor, number, security, clearance code, and that's it. No service record, no employment history, no references, nothing. Everybody's got a file. She's got a file. There's just nothing in it. It's like somebody took a file and hollowed it out with a spoon. Maybe she's never worked. She's 49. Maybe she's a housewife who took a certification course. That version caught on fast because it was the version that made sense to people. A woman in her late 40s, small, quiet gray, coming in at the temples, moves like she's not in a hurry. Somebody's aunt, somebody's mother. She'd probably done a 6-week course at some outfit in Arizona that hands out instructor cards to anybody with a credit card, and some contracting officer had needed a warm body to fill a slot, and here she was. That was the story. And a story on a military base moves faster than the truth ever will. By day 5, they'd started calling her Grandma. Not to her face, not at first. It started in the chow hall, and it moved to the smoke pit, and then somebody said it on the radio net by accident when they were tracking who was where, and after that the seal was broken, and it became a thing. Grandma's at the arms room. Grandma wants range 3. Somebody tell Grandma the coffee's in the back. Elena heard it. She had to have heard it. She walked through the chow hall at 11:40 every day, and the temperature of the room dropped a half a degree and rose again behind her. And she never turned her head, and she never slowed down, and she got her tray, and she sat by herself at the end of the far table with her back to the wall, and she ate, and she left. Staff Sergeant April Whitaker watched her do it 4 days in a row before she said anything about it. April was 29, and she'd been in 8 years, and she was one of maybe 6 women on a base of 1,100, and she learned early that the fastest way to make things worse for yourself was to make things better for somebody else. So she didn't say anything for 4 days. On the 5th day, she said something. "You always sit with your back to the wall." Elena looked up. "Yes, that's a habit." "It is." "Where'd you get it?" Elena chewed, swallowed. "Restaurants," she said. April waited. Elena didn't add anything. "That's it, restaurants. I don't like people behind me while I eat. It's not complicated, Sergeant." But April had been in 8 years, and she'd deployed twice, and she knew what it looked like when somebody sat with their back to the wall out of preference, and what it looked like when somebody sat with their back to the wall because their body would not physically let them do anything else. Elena's chair was angled 14 degrees off the table, not square to it, angled so that her right hand was clear and her sight line covered both doors. Nobody does that on purpose. You do that for 20 years and then you can't stop. April sat down across from her, uninvited. "Ma'am," she said, "I'm going to say something and then I'm going to leave and you can do whatever you want with it." "Okay." "Kowalski's going to make your life hell. He's already started. He's got about 8 guys who do whatever he tells them and about 600 more who will laugh at whatever he says because it's easier than not laughing. The last contractor they ran off lasted 11 days. What happened to him? He put in a complaint. Complaint went up. Complaint came back down with a note that said handled at the lowest level. 2 weeks later, his contract wasn't renewed." April leaned in. "The lowest level is Kowalski. That's the whole joke. There's nothing below him, and there's nothing above him that cares." Elena set her fork down. It was the first time April had seen her stop moving completely. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're going to lose," April said. "And I've watched a lot of people lose here, and I'd rather not watch another one." Elena was quiet for a second. Then she said, "You've decided I'm going to lose." "I've decided the math is bad." "That's a different thing from losing." April opened her mouth, closed it, and for the first time, something in the older woman's face made her genuinely uncertain. Not about the math, but about whether the math was the thing that mattered. "Sergeant Whitaker," Elena said, "thank you for sitting down. Most people won't, but you should probably get up now because if you're seen at this table for more than 4 minutes, it becomes your problem too. And I don't need any more problems and neither do you." April got up. She'd been sitting for 3 minutes and 40 seconds. She thought about that number for the rest of the day. The range request died in Block 14. Kowalski didn't deny it. That would have created a paper trail. He just didn't sign it, and he didn't say he wasn't going to sign it. And every time Elena came by the office, he was in a meeting or on the phone or out at the motor pool. And every time she left a note, he'd say later that he never got it. Day 6, day 7, day 8, nothing. On day 9, Elena stopped asking. She walked into the range control shack at 0540 on Thursday morning, and there was a specialist there named Kyle Boone, who was 19 and had been on shift for 11 hours and was at that particular moment asleep with his mouth open. Elena knocked on the door frame. Boone came up out of the chair like he'd been electrocuted. "Specialist." "Ma'am, sorry, ma'am. Range 3, is it allocated this morning?" Boone looked at the board. The board was a whiteboard with a grid drawn on it in permanent marker and the day's allocations written in dry erase. Range 306 to 0900 was blank. "No, ma'am, it's open." "Is there a procedure for using an open range?" "You got to be on the board, ma'am." "How do I get on the board?" "Approving authority signs off." "Who's the approving authority this morning?" Boone hesitated. "Master Sergeant Kowalski, ma'am. But he doesn't come in till like 7. So between 0600 and 0700, there's no approving authority." "I guess, technically." "What happens between 0600 and 0700 if a range is open and there's no approving authority?" Boone stared at her. He was 19 years old and he'd been awake for 11 hours and nobody had ever asked him a question like that in his life. "I don't nothing, ma'am. Nothing happens. Nobody's ever asked." Elena nodded. "Put me on the board." "Ma'am, I don't have the authority to." You have the authority to write on a whiteboard specialist. That's all I'm asking you to do. If somebody has a problem with it, you tell them I told you to do it, and you tell them exactly that word for word, and then it's my problem and not yours. Can you do that? Boone looked at the board. He looked at her. He picked up the marker.
Today.
At 0615, Elena Reyes was alone on Range 3 with a rifle she'd signed out of the arms room and 100 rounds she'd paid for out of her own pocket at a gun store in town because she'd tried to draw ammunition through supply on day 4, and that form had died in Block 14 too. She shot for 2 hours and 40 minutes. At 0855, she policed her brass, swept the firing line, filled out the range log, and walked back to the shack and handed Boone the log. Boone read it, then he read it again. Ma'am, specialist. Ma'am, you've got 100 rounds and 100 hits. That's right. And ma'am, some of these are at 600 meters with iron sights. Ma'am, this rifle it has iron sights. Yes. Boone looked at the paper. He looked at her. He was 19 and he had shot expert at basic, and he had thought for about a year afterward that shooting expert at basic meant he could shoot. Ma'am, is this real? Elena took the pen out of his hand, wrote a phone number at the bottom of the log, and slid it back. That's the range camera server, she said. It records everything on Range 3 automatically. It's been recording since I got here. Pull the footage if you want. I'd rather you did, actually. Then it's not my word. She walked out. Boone sat there for a long minute. Then he picked up the phone. Oh, yeah. Here's the thing about a military base. Nothing is secret. Nothing has ever been secret. There are 1,100 people living inside a fence in the middle of nowhere with nothing to do at night, and information moves through that population the way fire moves through dry grass, fast, hot, and in every direction at once. By 1400, 6 people had watched the range footage. By 1700, 60 had. By 2100, somebody had figured out how to pull it off the server onto a phone, and after that, it was gone out into the world, into group chats and text threads, in the back rooms of the barracks, and there was no getting it back. The footage was 3 hours long, and almost nothing happened in it. That was what made it terrifying. A woman walks onto a range. She sets a rifle on the mat. She lies down behind it. She doesn't fidget. She doesn't adjust. She doesn't do the little ritual dance that every shooter does, the shrugging and the settling and the finding of the position. She lies down and she's in the position immediately, like the position was already there and she just stepped into it. And then she shoots, and she does not miss. Not once, not at 100, not at 300, not at 600, not when she rolls to her side and shoots off the weak shoulder for 20 rounds, which nobody does, which nobody has done since Vietnam. And she does it like she's changing hands to answer a phone. The rounds go where she puts them. And the thing that got under people's skin, the thing that people kept rewinding to watch, was that she never checked. She never looked through the spotting scope. She never glassed the target to see where the round landed. She shot and she cycled and she shot again because she already knew. You only stop checking after 20 years. You only stop checking when checking stops telling you anything you don't already know. Sergeant First Class Marcus Dunn watched it 4 times that night in his room with the lights off, and then he sat on the edge of his bunk for a while with his hands over his face. Dunn was 38. He'd done 4 deployments. He was by any reasonable measure one of the top 3 shooters on Fort Whitmore, and he had a wall of certificates that said so, and he had spent 11 years believing that the difference between him and the best shooter he'd ever met was maybe 10%. He'd just watched a 49-year-old woman shoot 100 for 100 with irons and never once looked through a scope. The difference wasn't 10%. The difference was that he and she were doing 2 different things that happened to use the same equipment. He got up, he got dressed, he walked across the base at 11 at night, and he knocked on Kowalski's door. "It's fake," Kowalski said. "Vic, it's fake Marcus. Somebody edited it. You can do anything with video now. My nephew makes videos where he fights dinosaurs." Dunn stood in the doorway. Kowalski was in a t-shirt and sweats, and he had a beer, and he had not offered Dunn one, which was its own kind of statement. "It came off the range server," Dunn said. "Boone pulled it himself. There's a chain of custody. It's not edited." "Then the target's rigged." "How do you rig a target?" "I don't know. But somebody did, because I've been doing this for 22 years and I've never seen anybody shoot like that, and neither have you, and neither has anybody. So either every single thing we know about shooting is wrong, Or that woman is a liar, and Marcus, which one do you think it is? Dunn didn't answer. Kowalski took a pull off the beer. His hand wasn't steady. Dunn noticed that and filed it away. Vic, can I say something? You're going to anyway. What if it's not fake? Then I'm an idiot, Kowalski said. Then I've spent 9 days calling the best shooter I've ever seen a housewife in front of 600 people. That's what happens if it's not fake. So you'll understand if I'm not real motivated to look at it that way. And there it was. Dunn heard it, the actual thing said out loud, probably by accident, probably because of the beer. It was never about whether she could shoot. It was about what it would cost him to find out. The next morning, Kowalski called a meeting. He called it at 0600, which was early, and he called it in the big classroom, which held 200, and he put out the word that attendance was mandatory for all NCOs and strongly encouraged for everybody else, which on a military base means the same thing. The room was full at 0555. People were standing along the back wall. Elena Reyes sat in the third row on the aisle with her hands folded in her lap, and she had gotten there at 0540 and taken the seat nobody wanted, and she had not looked at her phone once while she waited. Kowalski came in at 0600 exactly. He had a folder. He set the folder on the podium, and he didn't open it, and that was the tell, because a man who has something in a folder opens the folder. Morning, he said. I want to talk about standards. Nobody moved. There's a video going around. Some of you have seen it. Most of you have seen it. Let's not pretend. He looked around the room. And I want to be real clear about something, because there's been a lot of talk in the last 24 hours, and I don't like the direction of it. Standards on this installation are set by the Army. They're not set by a video. They're not set by rumor. And they're sure as hell not set by whoever's got the most impressive story about themselves. Somebody coughed. Now, Miss Reyes, he said the way you'd hold something at arm's length. You're a contractor. You were brought in to help with our marksmanship numbers. I've got no problem with that. What I've got a problem with is a person walking onto my installation and putting Combat Master on a government form. He picked up the folder finally, opened it, held up a single sheet. Because I looked it up. There's no such qualification. Not in the Army, not in the Marine Corps, not in any of the branches, not in NATO, not in any allied service I could find. There is no such thing as a Combat Master. He set the sheet down. So what I'd like to know in front of everybody is where exactly that came from. The room was very quiet. Elena stood up. She did it without hurrying. She buttoned nothing straightened, nothing cleared her throat of nothing. She just stood. It came from a course, she said. What course, Most? A course that isn't in the system you searched. That's not an answer. It's the answer I have. Kowalski smiled. He'd been waiting for exactly this. So, a course that doesn't exist, that nobody can look up, that has no record anywhere, gave you a title that also doesn't exist. Do you hear how that sounds? Yes. You hear it. I hear it. It sounds like I'm lying. Elena's voice didn't change at all. That's a reasonable conclusion from the information you have. I probably to reach it myself. That threw him. He'd expected a fight. He'd built the whole morning around a fight. Then withdraw it he said. Right now, in front of everybody. Say you made a mistake on the form. Say you got confused and this ends. That's all. I'm giving you the door. No. I filled out the form correctly, Elena said. Block 9 asked for highest relevant qualification. I put my highest relevant qualification. If the form is wrong, the form's wrong. But I'm not going to say I lied on it, because I didn't, and I've got a rule about that. A rule. I don't say things that aren't true. It's not a moral position, Master Sergeant. It's practical. Once you start, you have to keep track of it, and I've never been good at keeping track of things. Somebody in the back laughed. Just one person. It was cut off almost immediately, but it happened, and Kowalski heard it, and his ears went red. Then prove it. I can't. Convenient. It's not convenient at all, Elena said. It's the single most inconvenient thing in my life. It has been for 11 years. And for 1 second, and no more something moved across her face that was not calm. Then it was gone, and she was calm again, and the room wasn't sure it had seen anything. But April Whitaker saw it. April was standing at the back wall, and she saw it, and it put ice down her spine, because she'd seen that expression exactly twice before in her life, both times on people who had been somewhere the rest of us don't go. 11 years, Kowalski repeated. That's right. What happened 11 years ago? Elena looked at him, and for the first time since she'd arrived at Fort Whitmore, she smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It wasn't a mean one either. It was the smile of somebody who has been asked a question they have wanted somebody to ask for a very long time, and who knows they still can't answer it. Master Sergeant, she said, if I could tell you what happened 11 years ago, I wouldn't be standing in this room. And she sat down. The meeting broke up at 0640. It was supposed to run an hour. Kowalski left first fast out the side door, and that was the wrong move. And he knew it was the wrong move before he'd finished making it, because the man who leaves first is the man who lost. Marcus Dunn found Elena in the hallway. Ma'am? Sergeant Dunn? She knew his name. He hadn't told her his name. I watched the footage, he said. I know. You know, Specialist Boone told me. He was worried he'd get in trouble. She adjusted the strap on her bag. I told him he wouldn't. Can you guarantee that? No, Elena said. But I told him anyway because he's 19 and he needed to hear it, and it's probably true. Dunn laughed. It surprised him. He hadn't planned on laughing. Ma'am, I've got a question, and I don't know how to ask it politely, so I'm just going to ask it. Go ahead. How long? Elena stopped walking. How long what? How long have you been shooting? I don't want the number of years. He struggled with it. When did you stop checking through the scope? When did that stop? And she turned and looked at him properly all the way for the first time. That's a very good question, she said. Nobody's ever asked me that one. Is there an answer to yes? She was quiet a moment. Around year 7. Year 7 of what? Sergeant Dunn. She started walking again. You're asking the right questions. I want you to understand that I'm not refusing to answer because I'm playing a game with you. I want to answer. I would love to answer. There is a version of this where I sit down with you and a cup of coffee and I answer every single question you have, and I've thought about that version a lot, especially at night. She reached the door and put her hand on it. But that version puts people in the ground. Real people with names who are alive right now because of a promise I made. So the answer is no. Forever. And I'm sorry. She pushed the door open and the desert light came in white and hard. Ma'am, Dunn said, one more. She waited. Are you here to teach us, or are you here for something else? Elena Reyes stood in the doorway with the light behind her, and Marcus Dunn would think about the next 4 seconds for the rest of his life, because in those 4 seconds she considered the question. She actually considered it. He watched her decide how much to say. I was sent here, she said, and by who? That's the wrong question too. Then what's the right one? Why, Elena said, the right question is why. And Sergeant, when somebody finally asked me that one, I might not be able to answer it either, but I'd sure like to hear somebody ask. And she was gone. Swear. That night, 3 separate things happened, and none of the people involved knew about the other 2. The first, Corporal Danny Ruiz in the S1 shop pulled Elena Reyes's file again because he couldn't stop thinking about it. He'd been thinking about it for 9 days. And this time he did something he hadn't done before, which was check the file's metadata, not the contents, the file itself, the record of the record. The file had been created 11 years ago. It had been modified once 6 weeks ago, right before she'd been assigned to Fort Whitmore. And the modification had been made by an account that Danny Ruiz did not have the clearance to identify. Not a name, not a rank, not even a unit. The field just said restricted, and when he clicked it, the system logged him out and put a note in his profile that he had attempted to access classified personnel data. Danny Ruiz sat in the dark of the S1 shop with his heart hammering and thought, she's not a contractor. Contractors don't have restricted modification flags. Contractors don't have anything. The second April Whitaker went to the gym at 2200 because she couldn't sleep, and Elena Reyes was there alone on the mat in the back corner, and April stopped in the doorway and did not go in. Because Elena wasn't working out. Elena was moving through something. Slow, deliberate. Empty hands, but not empty. Her hands were shaped around things that weren't there. And April watched her transition from a grip that was clearly a rifle to a grip that was clearly a knife to a grip that was clearly nothing April had ever seen in her life. And the transitions were seamless. They had no seams at all. And April realized she was watching somebody rehearse. Not train, rehearse. Like a musician running scales. Like somebody keeping a language alive that nobody else spoke anymore. April backed out of the doorway without a sound and did not tell anyone for 3 days. The third Master Sergeant, Vic Kowalski, at 2300 sat in his office with the lights off and made a phone call. "Yeah," he said. "It's Kowalski Whitmore. I need a favor." Pause. "There's a contractor here, Reyes Elena, mid-40s, maybe 50. I need to know who she is." Pause. "I know it's not, I know. I know that. That's why I'm calling you and not putting in a request." Longer pause. "Because she's making me look like an idiot, Ray, that's why." He listened for a while, then his face changed. "Say that again," Kowalski said. "Say that again slowly." He listened. "What do you mean, don't?" he said. "What does that mean, don't, Ray? Ray, what is that?" The line went dead. Vic Kowalski sat in the dark of his office holding a phone with nobody on the other end of it, and for the first time in 22 years, he felt the specific cold that comes when you realize you have picked up something and you cannot tell how heavy it is until you try to put it down. Elena Reyes taught her first class on day 11. 6 people showed up. There were supposed to be 42. She looked at the 6 of them, Dunn, Whitaker, Boone, and 3 privates who had clearly been sent as a joke by somebody, and she did not say anything about the empty chairs. She didn't mention them. She didn't acknowledge them. She just started. "Everything you've been taught about shooting is correct," she said. "That's the first thing. Nobody lied to you, but the fundamentals are the fundamentals, and they work, and I'm not going to stand here and tell you that everything you know is wrong, because that's what a fraud does. A fraud tells you your whole life was a lie, so you'll need him." Dunn was writing. He'd started writing in the first 8 seconds, and he didn't stop for 2 hours. "What I'm going to teach you," Elena said, "is what happens after correct. Because correct gets you to expert. And expert is where almost everybody stops, because expert is where the certificates stop and human beings stop where the certificates stop." She looked around the room. Expert means you can hit what you aim at. That's it. That's all it means. And I need you to understand that in the place I learned to do this, expert was the entry requirement. Expert was the paperwork you filled out to get in the door. Boone raised his hand. "Specialist." "Ma'am, what's after expert?" Elena picked up a piece of chalk. She turned to the board. She wrote one word: time. "Everybody in this room can hit a target," she said. "The question is, never can you hit it. The question is, how much time do you need?" And the answer for most people is about 1.5 seconds from the moment they decide to the moment the round leaves. 1.5. That's a good shooter. That's a really good shooter. She turned around. "Where I learned 1.5 seconds meant you were dead, because the man across from you needed 6/10. The room was silent. 6/10 of a second, Elena said. "That's the gap. That's the whole thing. Everything after expert is the war for that 9/10 of a second, and it takes years and it costs you things, and most people who go looking for it never find it, and some of the ones who find it wish they hadn't." She set the chalk down. "You want to know what combat master means?" she said quietly. "It doesn't mean I'm a good shot. There are better shots than me. It means somebody once put me in a room and measured how long it took me to decide." She picked up her water bottle, and her hand, Dunn saw it, and he would remember it. Her hand was not quite steady. "And I'm going to tell you something now that I'd rather not say, because you're going to hear it from somewhere else eventually, and I'd rather you heard it from me." She looked at the 6 of them. The number they measured wasn't 6/10. Nobody breathed. It was 4. She had known in that half second on the mat when Whitlock signed the sign-in roster with his left hand, slanting the letters backward, exactly the way the signature on the Cunard suppression order slanted backward, that the world was much smaller and much uglier than she'd let herself believe. She put the phone down on the mattress without calling anybody. Because if she said it out loud, it became real. And if it became real, she'd have to act on it. And if she acted on it before the board convened, then Aaron Vance died twice. At 2300, she picked the phone back up. "Go," Rook said. "It's his handwriting." A pause so long she thought the line had dropped. "Say that in a complete sentence, Bishop." "The G3 who signed the suppression order on Cunard. Marcus Whitlock. His son is my OIC. His son is the captain who tore my file up in front of 40 soldiers 9 days ago. That's not possible. I'm looking at his signature on a sign-in roster right now, Rook. I took a picture of it with my own phone. Same left slant, same broken cap on the W, same little hook on the K that a person makes when they learned cursive from a nun in 1968. You're comparing a general's handwriting to a captain's. They're the same handwritings, Nora said. A boy learns to sign his name by copying his father. That's not intelligence work, Rook. That's the most ordinary thing in the world. She heard him stand up. She heard him walk. She heard a door close. Nora, his voice had dropped. Listen to me very carefully. Do not photograph anything else. Do not compare anything else. Do not write anything down, not on paper, not on your phone, not in your head in a way you'd say out loud. Why? Because you were assigned to Fort Brantley in March. The son took command of that school in April of the year before. That's 14 months of separation. That's a coincidence. Do you believe that? No, Rook said. Then say the other thing. The other thing, Rook said slowly, is that somebody put you there on purpose. And I don't know who. And I signed the order. Nora sat very still on the edge of a mattress in a building that should have been condemned in 2009. You signed it, she said. I signed it because it came to me through channels that I trust. It had a routing code I've used 400 times. It looked like a personnel action. It looked like exactly what it looked like. She heard him breathe. Bishop, I have been doing this for 19 years, and I want you to understand that what I am saying to you right now is the worst thing I have ever said to another human being on a telephone. Say it. I might have been the delivery mechanism, Rook said. At 0600 Thursday, she stood in a formation in a pressed uniform because a lieutenant colonel had told her to, and Lieutenant Colonel Ruth Hobart walked the ranks with her coffee cup and said nothing about anything. And that was in its own way the loudest thing that had happened to Nora Bishop all week. Whitlock stood at the front of his school with his hands behind his back. Combatives is school, he said. Change to the training schedule. 40 people leaned a half inch. Effective Monday, every cadre member in this building will validate. Level 2, Level 3, Level 4 doesn't matter. You will step on the mat, you will demonstrate the full task list for your certification level, and you will be graded by an outside evaluator from Benning. Reyes said, Sir, we validated in January. You're validating again. Sir, that's not a thing. Validation's annual. It's a thing when I say it's a thing, Sergeant Reyes. Sir, Cade's voice in everybody's head came around because Cade had not said one word above a mumble since Monday. Sir, respectfully, an outside evaluator's a Benning asset. You'd need a request through battalion, and it takes 6 weeks, and it's July. He's already booked. Cade's mouth closed. He arrives Monday, 0800, Whitlock said. Sergeant Major Douglas Petrelli. The mat got very, very quiet. Nora watched Rhea's face and learned everything she needed to know about who Petrelli had been to these people. Sir, Rhea said, and her voice had gone flat. Petrelli. That's correct. The Petrelli you put in a cast. That's an unfortunate way to characterize a training accident, Sergeant. That's how he characterizes it, Omer. I talked to him at Christmas. Then you can ask him about it Monday. Whitlock said in person when he grades you. And he walked into his office and shut the door, and Nora Bishop stood in the 5th position of the 2nd rank and thought with a clarity that was almost restful that Captain Grant Whitlock had just made his first genuinely serious mistake and had no idea. Reyes found her in the equipment cage at 11:40. Sergeant Bishop, Reyes, he's not doing this to me. No, he's not doing it to Cade either. No, he's booked a sergeant major from Fort Benning, Reyes said, for the sole purpose of standing in front of 40 people and saying out loud that you are not on the roster. That's the whole play. That's the entire play. He's spending a Benning asset and 6 weeks of paperwork. He doesn't have to hear one sentence. Yes, Nora said, and you're just going to let him. Yes. Reyes put both hands on the shelf and looked at the floor. I taped your file back together, she said. I know. You know, Ward told me. He wasn't supposed to tell you that. He tells people things, Nora said. It's how he finds out what they're made of. Reyes laughed once, no humor in it, And then she stopped laughing and stood up straight and said, Sergeant, I've got a question, and if you can't answer it, just say so, and I'll drop it forever. Ask. On the mat with Kessler. You said carotid, not airway. You said he'd fit in 4 seconds. And he fit in 4 seconds. Reyes's jaw tightened. I've been a level 3 for 6 years. I've had combat lifesaver twice. I've never met a human being who could do that. That's not a question. Where did you learn that? Somewhere I can't tell you about. Sergeant? Reyes? Everybody in that building thinks you're a liar. I know. And you could stop it, Reyes said, in 1 sentence. You could stop it right now, and you're not stopping it. And I've been trying for 4 days to figure out what kind of person does that. And I finally got there this morning at about 400, and I want you to tell me if I'm right. Laura set down the medicine ball she'd been holding. Go ahead, she said. You're not protecting yourself, Reyes said. You're protecting somebody else. Nora didn't answer. That's a yes, Reyes said. That's nothing at all. Sergeant, that's the loudest yes I've ever heard in my life. At 13:20, Nora drove to the hospital on her lunch because Kessler had texted her a picture of a sandwich with the caption, "Still alive, Sergeant," and she'd admit under oath, more affected by it than she wanted to be. He was sitting up. There was a purple bruise across his throat like a thumbprint from God. Sergeant, Kessler. They said I was out for 26 seconds. 26. They said you called it before it happened. Reyes called the time. I just counted. That's not what Reyes said. Kessler shifted. His voice was wrecked and he sounded like a 40-year-old smoker. Reyes said you had your hands on my hips before Cade let go. She said you were already moving. She said you started moving on second 2 and Cade didn't let go until second 3. Reyes has a good memory. Sergeant? He looked at her, 20 years old. Why won't you let anybody help you? Nora sat down in the plastic chair. Danny, she said, and it was the first time she'd used his first name in daylight. Can I tell you something that's going to sound like a riddle? Yes, Sergeant? There's a family in Ohio, she said. A mother and a father and a sister. And for 6 years, they believed a thing about their son that isn't true. And the reason they believe it is that the true thing was written down and then unwritten, and the only person left alive who was on that ridge and can say what actually happened is sitting in this chair. Kessler didn't move. And there's a room, Nora said, in 9 weeks where I get to say it, and it's the only room. There is not another room. And if I do anything between now and then that lets somebody call me a liar with paperwork behind it, then that room closes and that family never gets the truth, and their boy stays what somebody decided to make him. What did they make him? Nora looked at the wall. A coward, she said. Kessler's hand closed on the blanket. He wasn't, Nora said. No, Sergeant. He was 23 years old and he was on a radio at 4 a.m. at 9,000 feet. And the transcript says he called for a withdrawal, and the recording says he called for a hold. She stood up. One of those is in a file. One of those is in a drawer. And in 9 weeks, I get to say which is which. Kessler said very quietly, so they can tear up your paper all day. They can tear up my paper all day, Nora agreed. Sergeant, what? That's not a riddle, Kessler said. That's just the saddest thing anybody's ever told me. At 15:10, Command Sergeant Major Ward stood in the doorway of Whitlock's office without knocking. Captain? Sergeant Major. Whitlock stood up. He wasn't stupid. Come in. I'll stand. Sir, I mean Sergeant Major, if this is about the validation I've got, the request routed through Battalion Colonel Hobart signed it Tuesday. Colonel Hobart signed a request for a Benning evaluator, Ward said. She didn't sign a request for Petrelli. The request doesn't specify. That's right, Ward said. It doesn't. You noticed that. Whitlock's face did something small. Sergeant Major, I don't understand the objection. There's no objection. There's an observation. Ward came in about a foot and stopped. You've been in this Army 9 years, Captain. In 9 years, I've never seen anybody route a Benning asset in 4 days. Not once, not for a general officer's funeral. You did it in 4. I made some calls. You made 1 call, Ward said. The room got quiet. Sergeant Major, you called your father's office, Ward said, and somebody in that office called Benning, and Benning found 6 weeks of lead time in a filing cabinet, And now a sergeant major who hates you is flying to Georgia on a Sunday to grade a woman you've decided is a fraud. He tilted his head. Captain, I want you to hear how that sounds coming out of another man's mouth, because I don't think you've heard it yet. Whitlock's jaw set. She's lying, Sergeant Major. Maybe. She's lying, and everybody in this building is scared to say it because she's a woman and she's got 25 years, and everybody's scared of the optics. Maybe. You don't believe me. I believe you, Ward said. That's not the same thing, and at some point in the next 2 weeks, you're going to find out how much not the same thing it is. Sergeant Major, with respect. Don't. With respect, Whitlock said anyway. I've read her file. It's 1 page. It says nothing, and I'm supposed to hand her 40 soldiers. Ward looked at him for a long moment. Captain, he said, how many people have you put in the hospital? What? It's not a hard question. That's not Sergeant Major. That's not relevant. Petrelli's arm, Ward said. A specialist named Gomez, 2023 dislocated shoulder. A lieutenant whose name I'm not going to say because he asked me not to. Ward's voice never changed. And I've got a log captain that Sergeant Reyes has been keeping in a green notebook for 18 months, and that log has 4 blackouts in it, and every single one of them happened in a school. You run under a curriculum you approved, and the only reason a private isn't dead this week is a woman you had sweeping the floor. Cade did that. Cade held the guillotine. And there it was. Ward went very still. Say that again, he said. Cade held the choke, Sergeant Major. That's a Cade problem. That's a discipline issue, and I'm handling it. You're handling it. Yes. By throwing your staff sergeant under a bus in your own office. By addressing a safety violation. Ward nodded slowly. Captain, you know what I noticed? In 9 days, I noticed you've never once said Kessler's name. Whitlock's mouth opened. Not once, Ward said. Not to me, not to Hobart, not in your memo. Your memo is 400 words, and it never says the boy's name. It says a soldier. It says an incident. 400 words about a woman you don't like, and not 1 word about a 20-year-old who seized on your mat. That's not fair. No, Ward said it isn't, and he left. At 18:45, Cade knocked on Nora's door. She opened it, and he was standing in the hallway in civilian clothes with a green notebook in his hand and a face like a man who hadn't slept since Monday, which he hadn't. Sergeant? Staff Sergeant? Can I come in? No, he blinked. There's nowhere in this building where you and I can be alone in a room with a door shut, Nora said not unkindly. That's not about you. That's about the fact that on Monday, a sergeant major from Benning is going to say I'm a liar. And after he says it, every single thing I've done for 11 weeks gets looked at again by people who've already decided. So we're going to stand in this hallway, and you're going to say what you came to say. And if anybody walks by, they're going to see 2 soldiers standing in a hallway. Cade let out a breath. Yes, Sergeant. Go. He held up the notebook. Reyes gave me this, he said, this morning. She just walked up and put it in my hands and walked away and didn't say anything. His voice cracked in the middle and he stopped and started over. 4. It's 4 Sergeant. Gomez in 23. A kid named Ashby. I don't remember him. That's the part. And Reyes wrote down the date and the time, and she wrote down 12 seconds, and I don't remember it happening. You wouldn't. Why wouldn't I? Because when you're the one squeezing, Nora said, it feels like nothing. That's the whole problem with it. You've got 100 pounds on him, and your shoulder's doing the work. And to you, it feels like leaning on a fence. Cade's eyes were wet, and he was working very hard on it. I've been teaching that for 6 years, he said. I know. I've taught that to Sergeant, I don't even know the number, 405. Probably 5. And every one of them's out there right now doing it to somebody. Nora didn't say anything because there wasn't anything to say that would be both true and kind, and she'd stopped choosing kind over true a long time ago. Sergeant, Cade said, fix it. I can't. Show me the mechanism. Just show me. 10 minutes. Nobody has to know. Cade. Nobody has to know, Sergeant. It's 18:45 on a Thursday, the pit's empty, I'll turn the camera off myself. And that right there was the moment. Nora Bishop would think about it for a long time afterward in a lot of different rooms, and she would never be entirely sure she'd gotten it right. No, she said. Sergeant, if I put hands on you in an empty room with the camera off, Nora said, Then on Monday, when Petrelli says my name isn't on the roster, Whitlock stands up and says she also conducted unauthorized training, usher with a subordinate at night with the surveillance disabled. And every good thing you and I might have done dies in that sentence. So no. Cade stared at the floor. Then what do I do? He said. You want the real answer? Yes. Go to Reyes, Nora said. Take that notebook to Reyes, and the two of you write a memo and you sign it, Cade. You put your name on it, and you walk it to Ward in the morning, and you say, here are 4 blackouts in 18 months in a school with a documented curriculum problem, and I am the man who did 3 of them, and I'm reporting myself. Cade's head came up. That'll end me. Probably. That's a career, Sergeant. That's 14 years. Yes. You're telling me to burn 14 years. I'm telling you that Ashby is somewhere right now with a brain that's a little different than it was, Nora said. And you don't remember his name, and there's exactly one way to make that mean something instead of just being a thing that happened. Cade stood in that hallway for what felt like a full minute. Sergeant, he said finally, you're a hard woman. Yes. Petrelli said that. Nora went absolutely still. What? Petrelli, Cade said. He used to say that. I never knew what he meant. He'd get half a beer in him and he'd say, there's a hard woman out there somewhere and none of you have any idea. Cade shrugged. We thought it was an ex-wife thing. Nora did not move a muscle in her face. Good night, Staff Sergeant, she said. She shut the door. And then she stood on the other side of it with her forehead against the wood for about 11 seconds, which was longer than she'd let herself have in 6 years. At 0900 Friday, Reyes called a phone number she'd had in her contacts since Christmas. It rang 4 times. Petrelli. Sergeant Major, it's Reyes. Brantley. A grunt. Warmth in it. Torn eyebrow. How's the arm? It's my collarbone, Sergeant Major, and it's fine. How's the school? That's why I'm calling. I know why you're calling, Petrelli said. I've been sitting here since Tuesday waiting for one of you to have the guts. Reyes closed her eyes. Sergeant Major, he booked you to burn a woman. I'm aware. You know what he's doing. Reyes, Petrelli's voice changed. I've known what Grant Whitlock was doing since about 4 minutes after I met him. Let me ask you a question. Sir, don't sir me, I work for a living. The woman, what's her name? Bishop, Sergeant First Class Nora Bishop. A pause, Cheshadam. That's not her name, Petrelli said. Reyes' stomach dropped through the floor. Sergeant Major, describe her. What? Describe her, Reyes. She's, I don't know, 5'7", 40-something, brown hair, real quiet. There's a scar under her left ear that goes back into the hairline. Reyes was talking fast now. Sergeant Major, why is that not her name? The silence on the line went on so long that Reyes checked the screen. Sergeant Major, say the scar again, Petrelli said. Under the left ear. Goes up into the hair. It's old. Petrelli said a word Reyes had never heard him say. Sergeant Major. Reyes, listen to me. Is she on the mat? No, he's got her sweeping. He's got her what? He's got her sweeping the mat, Sergeant Major, and reading the curriculum off a laminated card in front of the class. And Monday you're supposed to fly down here and grade her and tell everybody she's not on the roster. Petrelli laughed. It was not a good laugh. It was the laugh of a man who has just been handed something he has waited 4 years for and cannot believe he's holding. Reyes, he said, what time's my flight? Sunday. Move it. I'm coming Saturday. And Reyes, Sergeant Major, don't tell anybody I'm coming Saturday. Sergeant Major, what's going on? Who is she? And Douglas Petrelli said, I'm going to tell you something and you're going to keep it in your teeth. In 2011, at a schoolhouse that does not appear in any catalog, I spent 9 weeks getting taken apart by an instructor who never gave us a name. Nobody knew her name. We called her the widow because that's what was stenciled on her mat bag, and none of us ever found out if it was a joke. Reyes couldn't breathe. She is the reason I wrote half the curriculum you're using, Petrelli said. The half that works, and I have spent 14 years wondering if I made her up. At 11:15 Friday, a black government sedan came through the front gate of Fort Brantley, and the guard looked at the credentials for 11 seconds and then didn't say anything into his radio at all, which was, if anybody had been watching, much more unusual. At 11:40, the woman in the sedan was sitting in Lieutenant Colonel Ruth Hobart's office with her hands folded. Colonel? I'm sorry I didn't catch the name. You didn't, the woman agreed. Hobart set down her coffee cup. Ma'am, she said, I've been commanding soldiers for 22 years, and in that time I have developed a very reliable instinct for the exact moment my day stops being mine. Is this that moment? Yes. Okay, Hobart sat back. Go ahead. On Monday of last week, you executed a records inquiry on a Sergeant First Class Bishop. I did. Why? Because a captain in my battalion told me she was a fraud. And what did the inquiry return? It returned a red screen that told me I'd been flagged and would be contacted, Hobart said. And here you are, 9 days later, which I'd like to point out is 9 days. And if that's your response time to an unauthorized access on a sealed record, then I have some concerns about the Republic. The woman almost smiled. Colonel, the inquiry wasn't unauthorized. You're her commander. You're allowed. Then why the red screen? Because the red screen isn't for you, the woman said. It's a tripwire. It doesn't tell us she's been looked at. It tells us who's looking. Hobart's hands went flat on her desk. Say that again. There have been 9 inquiries against that record in the last 3 weeks, the woman said. Yours is the 7th. 9. 9. From where? That's the interesting part, the woman said. Yours is from Fort Brantley. 2 are from Fort Benning, which is explicable. Somebody's checking a roster. 1 is from Human Resources Command, also explicable. She uncrossed her legs. 5 are from the same terminal inside the Pentagon. The office was very quiet. The same terminal, Hobart said. Yes. Over what period? 6 weeks. The first one was March 11th. Hobart did the math and went pale, and the woman watched her do it. March 11th, Hobart said. She got here in March. She got here on the 22nd. So somebody in the Pentagon was pulling her record 11 days before she arrived at a post she hadn't been assigned to yet. That's correct. That's not possible. It's extremely possible, the woman said. It's just not legal. Hobart put a hand over her mouth. Ma'am, she said, whose terminal? I'm not going to tell you that. Ma'am. Colonel, I want you to understand something, and I want you to understand it right now, because in about 4 days, you are going to be asked to make a decision, and I'd like you to make it at Wake. The woman leaned forward. I did not come here for you. I came here because a captain in your battalion sent a memorandum to a general officer's desk, courtesy copy on the 20th, and that memorandum named a protected witness by name, by rank, by unit, and by physical location in an unclassified email, and put it in front of the one man on this planet who has the most to lose from her staying alive to testify. Hobart didn't move. Say the last part again, she said. You heard it. Say it again. Alive, the woman said. Hobart stood up so fast her chair hit the wall. You get out of my office right now and you get her off this post. I can't do that. You can't do that? If I move her, the board reads it as flight, the woman said. If I move her, the defense gets to say the witness was relocated by her handlers under conditions of pressure, and every word she says gets a footnote on it. If I move her, they win, Colonel, and they win clean, and they never even have to touch her. So she just sits here. She sits there for 9 weeks. For 8, the woman said. It moved. At 1600 Friday, Nora's phone buzzed. One word. Moved. She looked at it for a while. Then she typed, which way? The reply took 90 seconds, which was 80 seconds longer than Rook ever took. Toward east. Nora set the phone face down on the mattress and put both hands on her knees. Toward me, and the board had been accelerated. Toward me, and somebody had looked at a calendar and decided that 11 weeks of a woman sitting in Georgia sweeping a mat was 11 weeks too many. Toward meant she'd been wrong about the clock, and everybody who'd been counting on the clock was wrong too. Toward also meant that somebody had gotten scared. And Nora Bishop had learned on a ridge in Cunard province at 9,000 feet at 4 in the morning that a scared man is not less dangerous. He is only faster. At 0740 Saturday, a rental car pulled into the parking lot of the Brantley Combative School, and a man got out who was 6'4" and 240 and moved like his right arm still remembered something. Reyes was waiting for him. Sergeant Major. Torn eyebrow. He didn't shake her hand. He was looking at the building. Where is she? Sergeant Major, she's not here. It's Saturday. Where? Barracks, probably. Sergeant Major, what are you going to do? Petrelli looked down at her. I'm going to go find out if I've been crazy for 14 years, he said. She was in the pit. That was the thing that undid him, and he told Reyes about it later, and his voice wasn't right when he did. It was 08:10 on a Saturday morning, and the school was locked and dark and empty, and Sergeant First Class Nora Bishop was in the middle of an empty mat, alone in PTs, doing the most boring possible drill, a hip escape over and over and over slow. The way you do it when you are 44 years old and you have been doing the same thing for 25 years, and you have long since stopped needing anybody to watch. Petrelli stood in the doorway with the light behind him. She saw him. She kept going. 3 more. 4. Then she sat up on the mat and put her forearms on her knees and said without any surprise in her voice at all, "You got fat, Doug." Petrelli's eyes closed. "Oh, thank God," he said. "Oh, thank God I'm not crazy." "You were always a little crazy." 14 years. I know. 14 years I've been telling people about you, and every single one of them looked at me like I was a guy telling a fish story. He came in about 3 steps and stopped because he genuinely did not know if he was allowed closer. "Ma'am, don't. Ma'am, I've got to." "Doug, you broke my nose," Petrelli said, "in week 2 in 2011, and then you sat down next to me on the mat while I was bleeding all over myself, and you said the reason I broke my nose was that I loved winning more than I loved my students. And I've thought about that sentence every single day for 14 years, and I want you to know I fixed it. I want you to know I fixed it, ma'am. I fixed it in about 2016, and I've been fixed ever since." Nora looked at the mat. "I know," she said. "You know, I read your curriculum, Doug." Petrelli made a sound. "Sit down," Nora said. "You're going to want to be sitting down." He sat. "Monday," she said, "you're going to fly in here and stand in front of 40 soldiers and grade me. And when you do, they're going to hand you a roster, and my name is not going to be on it, and Captain Whitlock is going to ask you in front of everybody whether Sergeant First Class Nora Bishop is a certified master trainer. And I'm going to say she trained me." "No, you're not." Petrelli's head came up. "Ma'am, you're going to look at the roster," Nora said, "and you're going to say the truth, which is that the name Bishop does not appear on it." "That's not the truth. That's a fact. Those are different things, and you're the one who taught me the difference." "Doug." "No." Petrelli's voice went up, and it filled that whole empty building. "No, ma'am, respectfully, absolutely not. You want me to fly down here and put the last nail in you? You want me to stand in front of a room full of kids and hand that little son of a general a rope?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because if you say she trained me," Nora said, "then the very next question is where, and the question after that is when, and the question after that is under what name, and by the 4th question, you have described a program that does not exist out loud in front of 40 soldiers with cell phones, and then you are a witness too." Petrelli's mouth was open. "And then they don't have to discredit me," Nora said. "They just have to discredit you, and you're easy, Doug. You're a sergeant major with a documented grudge against the OIC who broke your arm. You're the easiest man in America to discredit, and they will do it in one afternoon, and it will cost them nothing, and you will lose everything, and it will not save me." Petrelli sat there on the mat for a long time. "Ma'am," he said, "what happened to you, Kunar?" "That's a place." "Yes." "Ma'am, what happened?" Nora Bishop looked at the man she'd broken in half in 2011 and decided on a Saturday morning in Georgia to break a rule she had kept for 6 years. "There was a boy," she said, 23, Sergeant Aaron Vance. "He was on the radio and I was 40 meters below him, behind a rock with my leg opened up, and there was an element coming up the draw. And the call was withdraw or hold. And he held. He held." "He held," Nora said, "and 11 men walked off that ridge because he held, and he was not one of them." Petrelli didn't say anything. "And the transcript says he called for a withdrawal," Nora said. "The transcript says he panicked. The transcript says the 11 men who lived did it in spite of him. And that transcript is what his mother read." "That's a lie." "Yes." "Who wrote it?" "That's the part," Nora said, "that I would go to prison for." Petrelli was quiet for about 10 seconds. Then he said, "Whitlock." Nora didn't answer. "Ma'am, I didn't say that." "You didn't have to say it." "Ma'am, I've been sitting here for 4 minutes trying to figure out why a woman like you is at a nothing schoolhouse in Georgia getting hazed by a captain? And the answer is, you're not. You're not at a schoolhouse in Georgia. Petrelli's face had gone gray. You're at a schoolhouse in Georgia that belongs to that man's son. Somebody put you here. Yes. Who? I don't know, Nora said. And that's the only thing in this entire situation that actually scares me. At 1100 Saturday, Grant Whitlock was in his office because Grant Whitlock was always in his office, and his phone rang and the screen said Dad. He picked it up on the second ring, which he'd been doing since he was 9. Sir, Grant. His father's voice was warm. His father's voice was always warm. That was the thing people never believed about Marcus Whitlock, that he was genuinely, disarmingly warm, and it had carried him from a trailer in Alabama to a star. How's the school? It's good, sir. It's good. I got your memo. Grant sat up. Yes, sir. Walk me through it. Sir, she's a fraud. She showed up in March with a 1-page file claiming master trainer. She's not on the betting roster. She refused to demonstrate in front of the formation. And last week, she disobeyed a direct order and put hands on a soldier during a medical event. Did she save him? Grant's mouth opened. Sir. The soldier, his father said. Did she save him? A pause. There were medics en route, sir. Grant. Sir, the point is the order. Son Marcus Whitlock said, and there was still warmth in it. That was the horrifying thing. There was still so much warmth in it. Answer the question. Grant Whitlock looked at the wall of his office, where there was a photograph of a man with a star on his shoulder, shaking hands with a chief of staff. Yes, sir, he said. She saved him. Okay, his father said. Sir, that doesn't change. Grant, listen to me. I want you to do something for me, and I want you to not ask why. Yes, sir. Cancel the validation. Grant's stomach dropped. Sir. Cancel it. Send Petrelli home. Put that woman on the mat teaching, give her whatever she wants, and don't write another word about her on a keyboard for the rest of your natural life. Sir, I don't understand. I know you don't, his father said. Sir, you're the one who told me, you said in April, you said watch that school, you said, Grant. You said there was somebody coming who was going to be a problem, Grant said, and his voice had gone up, and he heard it go up, and he hated it. You said that in April. You told me in April that battalion was going to send me somebody who'd try to run my school, and I should be ready, and I've been ready for a year, Dad. I've been ready for a year, and now she's here, and you're telling me to... Grant, stop talking. You're telling me to what? Hand her the school. Grant. No, sir. Respectfully? No, I did exactly what you said. I did exactly what you told me to do, and now I'm the one holding it, and you want me to just... Grant! Silence. Grant Whitlock, 32 years old, sat in his office in Georgia and heard his father breathe on a telephone. Son, Marcus Whitlock said, and the warmth was gone now. It had gone somewhere, and it was not coming back. I need you to hear a sentence, and I need you to hear it exactly one time. Everything you have done in the last 4 months, you did on your own. Do you understand me? Grant couldn't speak. Say you understand. Then, sir, say it. Sir, you're on my emails, Grant said. You're on all of them. You're the courtesy copy. There's a paper trail, sir. You told me to keep you copied. You said keep me copied, so I know what's happening in my son's... The line went dead. Grant Whitlock sat in his office and looked at his phone for 11 seconds. Then he stood up and walked to the door and locked it and sat back down and opened his laptop and began to delete emails. At 14:20 Saturday, Reyes came into Ward's office without knocking and put the green notebook on his desk. Sergeant at Major. Ward looked at it. That's the log. Yes, Sergeant Major. You've had that for 18 months. Yes, Sergeant Major. Why now? Reyes stood there and Ward watched a 29-year-old woman with a torn eyebrow arrive at the edge of the rest of her life. Because Cade's writing a memo, she said, and he's signing it, and I'm not going to let him do it alone. Ward sat back. That's going to hurt him. Yes, Sergeant Major. That's going to hurt you. Yes, Sergeant Major. Whose idea was it? Reyes hesitated. Sergeant, Ward said. Whose idea? Sergeant Major, she told him to do it, Reyes said. She told him to burn 14 years. She stood in a hallway and told a man to end himself, and she didn't blink. Ward closed his eyes. Yeah, he said. That's her. Sergeant Major, do you know who she is? No, Ward said. But I know what she is, and it's the same thing, and I've only met it 4 times in 39 years. And I'll tell you the truth, Sergeant, I don't like it very much. It's not a comfortable thing to be around. He opened the notebook. He read for about 90 seconds. Then he said very quietly, Reyes. Sergeant Major, there's a fifth. Reyes went cold. No, there's not. There's 4. I wrote it. I know there's 4. There's a fifth, Ward said and turned the notebook around and pointed at an entry in the back in handwriting that was not hers and ink that was not hers. That's not my writing. I know. Sergeant Major, I've had that notebook in my cargo pocket for 18 months. Read the date, Ward said. Reyes read it, March 11th. And under it, in a small, neat hand that slanted to the left, 4 words that made her hands go numb. She is not Bishop. Reyes did not move for 11 seconds. Sergeant Major, that's not possible. Read it again. I've had that notebook on my body for 18 months. It's in my cargo pocket. It goes in my locker at night. It goes in my car. Sergeant Major, I have literally slept with that notebook. Then explain the ink. I can't explain the ink. Then we've got a problem, Ward said, because somebody put their hands on your property and wrote 4 words in it on the 11th of March, and you never noticed. And that means either you're lying to me right now, or somebody in this building is extremely good at something they shouldn't be good at. Reyes sat down without being told, to which she had never done in her life. Sergeant Major, what was March 11th? Ward was already typing. Sergeant Major, give me a second. Sergeant Major, what was March 11th? Ward stopped typing. He looked at the screen for a long moment, and Reyes watched a 61-year-old man's face do something she had never seen it do, which was change. March 11th, Ward said, was a leadership site visit. By who? Ward turned the monitor. Reyes read it. Deputy Chief of Staff G3. Formal. No escort requested. Duration 90 minutes. Facilities viewed dining facility motor pool combative school. 90 minutes, Reyes said. 90 minutes. A brigadier general flew to Fort Brantley for 90 minutes and looked at a motor pool. And a combative school, Ward said. His son's combative school. Sergeant, a father visiting his son is the most ordinary thing on this earth, and it explains everything you're looking at, and I want you to sit with that for a second because that's exactly how it's supposed to feel. Reyes's hands were shaking and she put them under the desk. Sergeant Major, he wrote in my notebook. We don't know that. 11 days before she got here, Reyes said, a general officer came to this building for 90 minutes with no escort, and somebody opened my cargo pocket and wrote she is not Bishop in the back of a log that only I have ever read. And Sergeant Major, that log is the only document in the United States Army that proves this school hurts people. Ward closed the notebook. Reyes. Sergeant Major, where's it going to live now? Reyes stared at him. You just gave me the only copy of the only thing that matters, Ward said. So think, where does it live? You're safe. Wrong. Sergeant Major. Wrong, Ward said. Because my safe is on this post, and everything on this post belongs to a chain of command, and that chain has a picture of a man on the wall about 4 links up. He slid the notebook back across the desk. It lives with somebody who is not in my chain, and not in yours, and not on this post, and has no reason on earth to be holding it. Reyes' mouth opened. Petrelli, she said. Petrelli's at Benning. Petrelli's in the parking lot, Sergeant Major. Ward's head came up very slowly. Say that again. At 15:10 Saturday, Douglas Petrelli sat in a rental car in the Fort Brantley combative school parking lot with a green notebook in his lap and read it front to back twice. Reyes stood outside the window with her arms crossed. Well, she said. Petrelli didn't answer. Sergeant Major. Reyes, do you know what this is? It's a log. It's an indictment, Petrelli said. It's 18 months of contemporaneous documentation of a pattern of injury under a named officer's curriculum with dates and times and witnesses kept by a level 3 with no motive. And if you handed this to a JAG on a Tuesday, he'd have Grant Whitlock's name off that door by Friday. Reyes let out a breath. So it's good. It's the best thing I've ever held in my hands, Petrelli said. And I'm not going to use it. What? Get in the car. Sergeant Major. Reyes, get in the car. I'm not doing this through a window like a drive-through. She got in. You just said it was an indictment. It is. So use it. Reyes, use your head. Petrelli tapped the notebook. Who's it an indictment of? Whitlock. Which one? Reyes stopped. There it is, Petrelli said. There it is. It's an indictment of a captain. It's an indictment of a 32-year-old with a bad curriculum and a mean streak. And if I walk this to JAG on Tuesday, here's what happens. They relieve him. They give him back a letter. They send him to a staff job in Virginia where his father can see him at Thanksgiving. And everybody in this story gets exactly what they want except one person. Her, Petrelli said. Because the second that captain is gone, she's just a woman with a one-page file and no enemy. And the board convenes and the defense stands up and says the witness has a documented history of conflict with the accused family. She got his son relieved. This is a vendetta. And everything she says about Kunar dies right there in that sentence. In one sentence, Reyes. That's it. That's all it cost them. Reyes put her head back against the seat. That's why she wouldn't let Cade turn the camera off, she said. What? Thursday? Cade begged her to show him the mechanism. 10 minutes empty room, he offered to kill the camera himself. And she said no, and I didn't understand why she said no, and Cade came out of that hallway looking like somebody had hit him with a shovel. Reyes turned her head. She's not protecting herself. She's protected in the room she hasn't gotten to yet. Yeah. For how long? That's what I asked her, Petrelli said, and she gave me a number this morning that made my stomach hurt. At 15:50 Saturday, Nora's phone buzzed. 3. She looked at it a long time. Then she typed 3 what? Weeks. Nora Bishop sat down on the mattress. She typed, that's not enough time to build. The reply came fast, which meant he'd already written it. It's not enough time for them either. That's the point. Somebody moved it toward because somebody is out of road. She typed, who moved it? The reply took 4 minutes. I don't know. Nora looked at that for a while. Then she typed one more thing, and it was the first genuinely reckless thing she'd done in 6 years. Rook, who requested Brantley. The 3 dots came up. They went away. They came up again. They went away. And then her phone rang, which was against every rule they had ever had. You don't call me, she said. Nora. Rook's voice was wrong. I pulled the routing on your assignment order. And it didn't come down from personnel, he said. It came up. It came up from the field. Somebody in the field submitted a request by name for Fort Brantley Combative School Cadre Billet, and it hit my desk with a clean code, and I approved it in about 90 seconds because it looked exactly like 400 other things I signed. Who submitted it? Rook was quiet. Rook. The signature block is redacted, he said, but the submitting terminal has a location code. And Nora, I want you to sit down before I say this. I'm sitting down. The location code is Fort Brantley. Nora didn't move. Somebody at Brantley, Rook said, asked for you by name in January, 11 weeks before you got there. Somebody who is standing in that building right now got you sent to that building, and I signed it, and I want you to tell me right now, this second, do you know who it is? Yes, Nora said. The silence on the line was total. Say it, Rook said. No. Bishop. No, she said, not on a phone. Nora, if you know who requested you. Rook, I want you to listen to me very carefully, Nora said. The reason I'm not telling you is not that I don't trust you. It's that in 3 weeks, somebody's going to ask you under oath what you knew and when, and I want you to be able to say, I didn't know, and I want it to be true, because you are the only person left who can put a document in front of that board, and I am not going to spend you on a phone call. That's not your decision. It's exactly my decision, she said and hung up. At 1640, Saturday Specialist Rennick was in the personnel office because she had been in the personnel office every Saturday for 3 years because her mother lived 4 hours away, and she did not have anywhere else to be. Her computer made a sound she'd never heard it make. It was a small sound. It was almost nothing. It was the sound of a mailbox integrity alert, which was a thing that existed in a manual somewhere and had never once in her entire career actually fired. She clicked it. Mailbox.whitlock.grant.t.mil. Items purged 411. Window April 14th to July 20th. Retention policy. Federal Records Act 36. CFR 1236. Status items preserved in journaling archive. Notification sent to records manager. Rennick read it 3 times. Then she said out loud, alone in an empty office, "Oh, you idiot." Because specialist Anna Rennick was the records manager. She had been the records manager for 2 years because nobody else wanted it, because it was an extra duty with no award attached, and she had accepted it at a formation in 2024 while thinking about lunch. She sat there for a very long time. Then she picked up her phone and called Command Sergeant Major Ward at his house on a Saturday, which she had never done, which she had never even considered doing. He picked up on the fourth ring. Ward. Sergeant Major, this is Specialist Rennick personnel. I'm sorry to call you at home. Rennick. A pause. What? Sergeant Major, I need to ask you a question, and I need you to not ask me why I'm asking, Ward said. Go ahead. And something in the way he said it told her he'd been waiting for a phone call all day and hadn't known which one. If somebody deleted 411 emails, Rennick said, and I have all 411 of them in an archive that they don't know exists, and about 90 of them are addressed to a general officer. What am I supposed to do, Sergeant Major? The silence went on so long she checked her screen. Sergeant Major, Rennick Ward said, do not touch that computer. I'm not touching it. Do not open one of those emails. I haven't. Do not tell one other living person. Sergeant Major, I called you. I know, Ward said, and I want you to understand that I'm now the second person in the United States Army who knows, and I want you to think about what that means about me for a second because it's Saturday and I've had a hell of a day. Sergeant Major, what do I do? You go home, Ward said. You go home and you sleep, and Monday morning at 0600, you are going to walk into Colonel Hobart's office, and you are going to say exactly what you said to me in that order, in those words, and you are not going to editorialize one syllable. Can you do that? Yes, Sergeant Major. Rennick. Sergeant Major. You just ended a man's career with an extra duty nobody wanted, Ward said. I want you to know that. I want you to know it happened and that it was you and that you did it right. Rennick sat in an empty personnel office and started to cry, which surprised her considerably. At 0900 Sunday, Grant Whitlock knocked on his own school's door because he'd forgotten his key. Petrelli opened it. Grant took a step backward. Sergeant Major. Captain. You're a day early. I'm 4 years late, Petrelli said. Come in. It's your building. Grant came in. He was in civilian clothes, a golf shirt, and Petrelli watched him realize about 2 seconds too late that he was in civilian clothes in front of a man he'd broken and that there was nothing on him that said Captain. Sergeant Major, how's the arm? You want to know how my arm is? I'm asking. Captain, in 4 years, you have never once asked me how my arm is, Petrelli said. You didn't ask me in the aid station. You didn't ask me at the hearing. You didn't ask me when I cleared out my desk. So no, you're not asking. You're saying words because there's a silence, and you don't like silences, and you never have. And that's actually your entire personality, and I've been trying to explain it to people for 4 years. Grant's jaw flexed. Sergeant Major, if you have a grievance, I've got a question. Ask it. Who's Nora Bishop? Grant blinked. She's a fraud. Wrong answer. Excuse me. I said wrong answer, Petrelli said. Try again. Who is she? Sergeant Major, I don't know what you think you're doing, but you're a betting evaluator on a temporary duty in my school, and you're going to grade a validation tomorrow. That's it. That's the whole... Captain, when did you first hear her name? Grant stopped. Petrelli watched him stop. That's an interesting reaction, Petrelli said. March, Grant said. March when the assignment came down. You're sure? Yes. Say it again. March. Captain, Petrelli said, on the 11th of March, your father came to this building for 90 minutes with no escort. Your father, a brigadier general, flew to Georgia, walked a motor pool, walked your mat, and left. And 11 days later, a woman showed up here that you have spent 4 months destroying. Grant's face went white. That's my father. Yes. He came to see me. Did he? He came to see his son, Sergeant Major. That's what fathers do. Are you seriously? Captain, what did he say? What? On the 11th of March, Petrelli said, in this building for 90 minutes, what did your father say to you? And Grant Whitlock opened his mouth and nothing came out. Because he had already told Nora Bishop's whole story to himself 100 times, and it had a beginning. And the beginning was a phone call in April where his father said, watch that school, Maori's coming, And he had never once, not one single time in 4 months, gone back 1 month further and asked why his father had been standing on his mat in March. "Get out of my building," Grant said. "Captain, get out of my building, Sergeant Major. That's an order. Get out." "You want to know the funny part?" Petrelli was already walking. "I came here to hurt you. I've had 4 years of it. I had a whole speech." He stopped in the doorway. "And I stood here for 6 minutes and watched you realize something, and I don't want to hurt you anymore, Captain. And I want you to understand that that is the worst thing that's ever happened to you." At 11:20 Sunday, Kessler came back to the barracks with a bag of his own stuff from the hospital and a purple throat and knocked on Nora's door. "Sergeant, you're supposed to be on quarters for 3 weeks." "I'm on quarters. Quarters is here." He held up the bag. "Sergeant, can I ask you something?" "You're going to anyway. There's a rumor. There's always a rumor. They're saying you're getting boarded out on Monday. That's not what a validation is. Sergeant, everybody in this building knows what Monday is." Kessler's voice was still reckoned, and it made everything he said sound older than he was. "Monday's the day a sergeant major stands up and says your name's not on a list." "Yes." "And then what?" "And then I go back to sweeping. For 3 weeks. Nora looked at him. "How do you know it's 3 weeks?" she said. Kessler shrugged with one shoulder. "Kessler, you told me 9, Sergeant. In the hospital. You said 9 weeks. He looked at the floor. "And Reyes told Cade it was 8 on Friday. And this morning, Cade said 3. So somebody's moving it, and I did the math. And Sergeant, things don't move toward you when you're winning." Nora Bishop stood in a doorway and thought about the fact that the smartest person in the entire building was a 20-year-old private who'd been unconscious 8 days ago. "Danny, Sergeant, when you get back on the mat," she said, "you're going to breathe through your nose. In through the nose, out through the nose, all the way through the roll. Even when it hurts, even when you think you're dying, especially then." "Sergeant, why are you telling me this now?" "Because I'd like to have told you," Nora said, and closed the door. Kessler stood in the hallway for about 30 seconds. Then he went and found Reyes. At 1300, Sunday, Lieutenant Colonel Ruth Hobart drove to a diner 40 minutes off post because she had learned in Sangan that there is no such thing as a private conversation inside a fence, and sat down across from a woman who still hadn't given her a name. "You came back." "I never left," the woman said. Hobart put her hands around a coffee cup. 3 weeks. "Yes. Ma'am, on Friday you told me 8. It's Sunday. It moved." "Who moved it?" The woman turned her own cup a quarter turn. "Colonel, I'm going to tell you something because you're about to be the only officer in that battalion with clean hands, and I'd like you to keep them clean." She looked up. "The board didn't move because we pushed. The board moved because the other side asked for it." Hobart set the cup down. "Say that again." "Defense counsel filed for an expedited schedule on Thursday," the woman said. "Citing the accused's right to a speedy resolution, citing career impact, citing the emotional toll of a prolonged investigation on a man with 31 years of honorable service. They asked for it. They asked for it. Why would they ask for it?" "Colonel, no, tell me. Tell me why a man who's been running out the clock for 6 years suddenly wants a court date in 3 weeks. Hobart's voice had gone hard and flat. "Because I've been a commander for a long time, and I've never once seen a guilty man asked to be tried sooner." "You have," the woman said. "You've just never seen it from the outside." Hobart went cold. "They think she won't make it," she said. The woman didn't answer. "That's it? That's the whole thing? They pulled it into 3 weeks because 3 weeks is exactly long enough for a captain who hates her to make her do something." Hobart put both palms on the table. "They're not racing her. They're racing him. They think that boy is going to break her in 3 weeks, and they want the court date sitting there when he does." "Yes." "Does she know?" "She's known since March," the woman said. Hobart stopped breathing. "What?" "Colonel, I've been doing this for 22 years, and I have handled a lot of protected witnesses, and every single one of them has done the same thing, which is beg me to move them somewhere else." The woman finally actually looked tired. She's the only one who ever asked to be moved closer. At 1540 Sunday, Cade found Nora in the parking lot. He had a piece of paper in his hand, and it had been folded and unfolded so many times it was soft. "Sergeant, Staff Sergeant, it's done." He held it out. Nora didn't take it. "Read me the first line," she said. Cade's hands were shaking. He looked at the paper, and then he didn't look at the paper because he had it memorized because he'd written it 11 times. "I, Staff Sergeant Marcus Cade," he said, "report myself for a pattern of unsafe instruction resulting in the loss of consciousness of 3 soldiers under my supervision between January 2024 and July 2026, including Private First Class Daniel Kessler, and I request an investigation into the curriculum and the command climate that permitted it." Nora was quiet for a second. "3, she said. "Sergeant, Rhea's log says 4. "One of them was Whitlock's," Cade said, "in 24. And I put my name on it at the time because he told me to, and Sergeant, I'm not putting my name on it twice. I did 3. I'm reporting 3. If they want the 4th, they can come ask me under oath, and I'll say it out loud in a room with a stenographer." Nora Bishop looked at Staff Sergeant Marcus Cade for about 4 seconds. "Staff Sergeant, Sergeant, that's the best sentence anybody's said to me in 6 years." Cade's face came apart just for a second, and then he got it back. "Sergeant, can I ask you something?" "Ask." "Thursday night," he said, "in the hallway, you told me to burn 14 years. "Yes." "Why'd you say it like that?" "Like what?" "Like it was nothing," Cade said. "Like you were telling me to move a cone. You didn't hedge it. You didn't say, think about it. You looked at me and you told me to end myself, and you didn't blink, and I've been chewing on it for 3 days, and I finally figured out why it worked." "Why?" "Because you'd already done it," Cade said. Nora didn't answer. "That's it, isn't it? You already burned yours. Whatever you were, whatever's in that file, that's not in that file. You already put it in the ground for somebody, and that's why you could look at me like that." "Staff Sergeant, that's a yes. Go take that to Ward," Nora said, "right now before you sleep on it." "Sergeant." "Cade, go before you're smart enough to not." At 0600 Monday, Specialist Anna Rennick walked into Lieutenant Colonel Ruth Hobart's office and said exactly what she'd been told to say, in exactly the order she'd been told to say it, and did not editorialize one syllable. Hobart listened to all of it without moving. Then she said, "Specialist." "Ma'am?" 411. "Yes, ma'am." "In one sitting." "Saturday, ma'am, 11:20 to 14:40, 3 hours and 20 minutes. Hobart closed her eyes. "Ma'am, is he in trouble?" "Specialist, is that a real question?" "Ma'am, I'm 23, I've been in 4 years, and I've never seen anybody above a sergeant get in trouble for anything," Rennick said. "So yes, ma'am, it's a real question." Hobart opened her eyes. "Sit down," she said. "Ma'am, I'm okay." "Sit down, Rennick." Rennick sat. "On the 22nd of March, Hobart said, a Sergeant First Class walked into your office, and you typed her name into a computer, and it came back 1 page, and you leaned over that counter, and you asked her if she wanted you to call somebody." Rennick's mouth opened. "She told me," Hobart said, "she told me that in this office 3 weeks ago, and I didn't think about it again until about 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon, and then I thought about it for a very long time. Ma'am, she looked like you were the first person on this post to be decent to her," Hobart said. "And it lasted about 90 seconds, and then a captain walked in, and you got scared, and I want you to know that I don't hold that against you because I've been scared of captains too, and I outrank them." She leaned forward. "And now it's Monday, and you're the only person in this building holding 411 emails. And I want you to understand that that is not a coincidence, Specialist. That's not the universe. That's just what happens when the person who takes the job nobody wants turns out to be the person who was paying attention." Rennick sat very still. "Ma'am, is he in trouble?" "Specialist," Hobart said. "He's finished." At 0750, Monday, 40 soldiers formed up in the pit. Sergeant Major Douglas Petrelli stood at the front with a clipboard and a face like a shut door, and Grant Whitlock stood beside him in a pressed uniform with his hands behind his back, and Nora Bishop stood in the second rank in the 5th position. Ward stood in the back by the door, which nobody had asked him to do. "Combative school," Whitlock said. "Sergeant Major Petrelli is here from Fort Benning to conduct a cadre validation. This is a standard event. Everybody relax." Nobody relaxed. "Sergeant Major," Whitlock said. The floor is yours." Petrelli looked at the clipboard. "Before I start, He said, I want to say one thing to this school and then I'll never say it again. And Whitlock's head turned. 4 years ago, I stood on this mat and a man broke my arm, Petrelli said. And I've spent 4 years telling anybody who'd listen that it wasn't an accident. And I want to say in front of all of you that I was wrong. The formation made a sound. Whitlock's shoulders came down about an inch. It was an accident, Petrelli said. It was absolutely an accident, and I know that because I've watched him for 4 years, and if he was capable of doing it on purpose, he'd be a much more dangerous man than he is. The formation did not make a sound. Whitlock's shoulders went back up. Sergeant Major, he said quietly. Roll call, Petrelli said. Reyes. Here, Sergeant Major. Cade. Here, Sergeant Major. Petrelli went down the list. 14 names. Nora waited. He got to the bottom. That's cadre, he said. That's the validation. Whitlock said, Sergeant Major, you missed one. Did I? Bishop. Petrelli looked at the clipboard. There's no Bishop, he said. And there it was. It went through that formation like a current, and Nora felt every one of the 40 people around her stop breathing at the same time, and she stood there in the 5th position of the 2nd rank and did not move a muscle. Say it again, Whitlock said, and he could not keep it out of his voice, the thing that had been building in him since March. For the whole school. Captain, Sergeant Major, say it again. The name Bishop, Petrelli said, does not appear on the master trainer roster. Louder. It's not on the roster. Whitlock turned to the formation. There it is, he said. That's 4 months. That's 4 months of this school being told to look at the floor and mind its business and be very careful and be very respectful, and a sergeant major from Fort Benning just said it in 11 words. He turned. Sergeant Bishop, front and center. She stepped out. She marched to the front and did a facing movement and stood at attention in front of 40 people, and Whitlock let it hang for exactly as long as he was good at. Anything to say? No, sir. Nothing. No, sir. Sergeant Major Petrelli just told this school you're a liar. Nothing. Sergeant Major Petrelli, Nora said, told this school that the name Bishop is not on the roster. The pit went absolutely silent. Whitlock's head cocked. That's the same thing. No, sir, Nora said, it isn't. And that was when Petrelli said, Captain, ask me the other question. Whitlock turned. What? Ask me the other question, Petrelli said. You've got one shot at it, and it's right there. And I've been standing here for 4 minutes waiting to see if you're the man I think you are or the man I hope you are. Sergeant Major, I don't know what you're... Ask me if she's qualified, Petrelli said. Nobody in that building moved. Whitlock stood there with 40 soldiers looking at him and a sergeant major offering him a door. And Nora Bishop watched him, and she would tell somebody later that she genuinely did not know which way it was going to go, and that she had almost for about a second and a half felt sorry for him. That's not the question, Whitlock said. It's the only question. The question, Whitlock said, is whether her name is on the roster. And it isn't. And you just said so. And I've got 40 witnesses. Petrelli nodded slowly. Okay, he said. Okay, Captain. Sergeant Bishop, Whitlock said, you're relieved of cadre duties pending administrative action. Report to battalion, Sergeant Major Petrelli. Thank you for your time. Your evaluation's complete. I'll drive you to the airport myself. Captain, your evaluation is complete, Sergeant Major. Captain, I'm not finished. Yes, you are. Captain Whitlock, Petrelli said, I am a Sergeant Major of the United States Army conducting a directed evaluation under a request signed by your battalion commander, and I will tell you when I'm finished. Whitlock's face went red. Reyes, Petrelli said, step out. Reyes stepped out. Cade, step out. Cade stepped out. Sergeant Major, Whitlock said, what are you doing? I'm evaluating your school, Petrelli said. Sergeant Reyes, on the record, in 18 months, how many soldiers have lost consciousness on this mat? 5, Sergeant Major. The formation came apart. Somebody said what out loud? Somebody said 5. You said 4 on Friday, Petrelli said. There's a 5th entry in my log, Sergeant Major, in handwriting that isn't mine, dated 11 March, and I've never seen it before in my life. Sergeant Major, Whitlock said. His voice had gone up. This formation is dismissed. Combative school fallout. Nobody moved. 40 people stood in a pit, and not one of them moved, and Grant Whitlock heard for the first time in his life the sound of an order landing on the floor. I said fall out. Staff Sergeant Cade, Petrelli said. On the record, did you submit a self-report to your command Sergeant Major yesterday? Yes, Sergeant Major. Read me the first line. And Cade read it, all of it. His voice cracked in the middle and he kept going. And when he got to the end, he said the last part looking directly at Grant Whitlock, and it was the bravest thing anybody in that building had ever seen a man do. And I request an investigation, Cade said, into the curriculum and the command climate that permitted it. Nobody breathed. Captain Petrelli said, my evaluation of this school is complete. Would you like my finding? Grant Whitlock stood in the middle of his own school with 40 of his own soldiers watching him and his father's phone number in his pocket and 311 emails he could not get back. And he did the only thing he had ever known how to do, which was the reason all of it happened. He turned to Nora. You did this, he said. No, sir. You've been here 4 months and my school's on fire. Sir, your school was on fire in January. Get on the mat, the pit stopped. Sir, Reyes said, get on the mat, Sergeant Bishop. Sir, I'm not able to demonstrate at this time. Captain Ward said from the back, and his voice went through that building like a rifle bolt. Stand down. Sergeant Major, this is my school. Captain Whitlock, I am telling you one time as a command sergeant major with 39 years, stand down. Get on the mat, Whitlock said, and he was not looking at Ward. He was not looking at anybody. He was looking at a 44-year-old woman with a broom scar on her palms, and he had stopped being an officer somewhere in the last 90 seconds, and everybody in that room could see it. You want to be a master, get on the mat and be one, right now, in front of everybody, or take that rank off your chest and get off my post. Sir? Now, Sergeant. And Nora Bishop said very quietly, Sir, I need you to say the next part out loud. Whitlock blinked. What? You've given me a lawful order to conduct combatives training, she said. That's lawful. I've declined and I've stated a reason. Now you're going to say the next part, and I need you to say it in front of 40 people because I want to be very precise about which of us did this. What are you talking about? Order me onto the mat with you personally, Nora said, and I'll go. The building stopped. Ward said, Bishop. Petrelli said, ma'am, no. And Grant Whitlock, 32 years old, standing in the wreckage of everything his father had built for him, smiled. Sergeant First Class Bishop, he said, you will report to this mat at 1400 hours today and demonstrate the level 4 task list against me. That's an order. Yes, sir, said Nora. And she saw it in his face. Just for a quarter of a second, the thing she'd been waiting 4 months to see, the thing she'd swept a floor for and read a laminated card for and eaten into formation's laughter for. Relief. He was relieved, which meant somebody had told him to get her on that mat, and which meant Nora Bishop had just found out at 08:11 on a Monday morning in Georgia that she'd been right about everything except the one thing that mattered, which was how much time she had left. Petrelli caught her arm in the hallway at 08:19, and Nora let him, which told him more than anything she said. Ma'am, don't. Ma'am, you just handed him the only thing he needed. I know. You know. Petrelli's voice was low and shaking. You've spent 4 months eating it. 4 months. You let him tear your file up. You let him put a broom in your hands. You let a room full of children laugh at you. And you did all of it because you couldn't touch anybody. And then at 08:11 on a Monday, you looked at that man and you invited him. Yes. Why? Nora turned and looked at him. Because he was relieved, Doug. Petrelli stopped. What? When I said order me onto the mat with you personally, Nora said his face went soft for about a quarter of a second. Not angry, not scared, relieved. Like a man who's been carrying something for 4 months and somebody finally took it off his back. She waited. You've been an instructor for 14 years. What does that face mean? Petrelli's mouth opened. It means he had a task, he said. It means he had a task. Ma'am, if he had a task, then he's not the problem, Nora said. He was never the problem. He's the delivery mechanism. And I've spent 4 months treating him like the enemy because he's loud, and Doug the loud one is never it. You taught your students that. I taught it to you. Petrelli put his back against the wall. Ma'am, what's the task? Get her on the mat. Why? That's the part I don't have, Nora said. and I've got 5 hours and 41 minutes. At 0840, Grant Whitlock locked his office door and called his father, and it went to voicemail. He called again. Voicemail. He called a third time, and a woman answered, a captain and aide, and she was pleasant and efficient, and she said the general was in a meeting, and Grant said, this is his son, and she said, yes, sir, I know. And Grant Whitlock sat down very slowly in his own chair. When's he out? Sir, I'm not able to say. Kelly, he'd known her for 2 years. Kelly, when's he out? A pause on the line that lasted a beat too long. Sir, she said, the general isn't going to be available today. Today, or this week, sir. Grant Whitlock sat with the phone against his ear. Kelly, did he tell you to say that? Sir, did he write that down for you? Is it on a card? Captain Whitlock, she said, and her voice had gone very careful and very kind, which was worse than anything. I've worked for your father for 2 years, and I'd like to say something to you off the record, and then I'd like to hang up. Say it. Whatever you're about to do today, she said, don't. The line clicked. Grant Whitlock sat in his office and looked at the wall where a photograph hung of a man with a star shaking hands with a chief of staff, and for the first time in 32 years, the thought arrived that it had been standing outside his door since Sunday morning at 9, when a sergeant major asked him what his father had said in March. He didn't come to see me. Grant stood up and walked out, and he did not lock the door behind him, and everything that happened for the rest of that day happened because of it. At 0900, Hobart called Ward. Sergeant Major, ma'am, tell me what happened at 0811. You already know what happened. I want to hear you say it. A captain ordered a sergeant first class onto a mat at 1400 to fight him personally in front of 40 soldiers, Ward said, and the sergeant first class asked him to. Silence. She asked him to. Yes, ma'am. Sergeant Major, I have spent 72 hours with a woman from an agency I can't name telling me that if that sergeant puts one hand on one soldier, the entire thing dies. Yes, ma'am. So why did she ask? Because she's smarter than us, Ward said. And I've been standing in a hallway for 40 minutes trying to figure out how much smarter, and ma'am, I don't like the number I'm getting. Hobart closed her eyes. Cancel it, she said. Ma'am, I'm the battalion commander. Cancel it. Write the order. I'll sign it. 1400 does not happen. Ma'am, I want you to think about that for 11 seconds. Sergeant Major, 11 seconds, ma'am. That's all I'm asking. Hobart stopped, and then she said very slowly, if I cancel it, he doesn't have to do it. That's right. And he goes home and he calls his father, and his father says good, and nobody ever finds out what 1400 was for. That's right, ma'am. And she stays a liar. For 3 weeks, Ward said, and then she walks into a room and testifies against a general officer, and defense stands up and says her own battalion commander pulled her off a mat because she wasn't safe to be around soldiers. And ma'am, that's not a footnote. That's the whole cross-examination. That's 4 hours of it. Hobart sat in her office with her hand over her mouth. Sergeant Major, if I let this happen and it goes wrong, it's going to go wrong, ma'am. Then what am I doing? Ma'am, Ward said. You're doing the same thing she's been doing since March, which is standing still while it happens to you. And I want you to understand, it's the hardest thing there is, and everybody who's ever done it has hated every second, and it's the only thing that's ever worked. Hobart didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she said, Sergeant Major, get me every camera in that building working by noon. They work, ma'am. Then get me a second one, Hobart said. Get me a second one that isn't on the network and isn't on this post and doesn't belong to the United States Army, and put it in somebody's hand who has never once been in trouble, and don't tell me who. Ward almost smiled. Yes, ma'am. At 0940, Reyes found Kessler in the barracks stairwell with his phone in his hand. No, Sergeant. Absolutely not Kessler. Sergeant Reyes, I'm on quarters. I'm not even supposed to be in that building. I'm the only person on this post who can stand in the back and film it and not get relieved for it. Kessler, you're 20. So if this goes the way I think it goes, Reyes said, somebody is going to come for that phone, not ask, come. Then they'll come, Kessler said. Reyes looked at him. You've had a brain injury 80 days ago. Yes, Sergeant. You've got a fractured hyoid. Yes, Sergeant. Give me one reason. Kessler's voice was still wrecked, and he said it anyway. Because I was dead for 26 seconds, he said, and she was already moving on second two. Rhea stood in the stairwell for about 4 seconds. Back corner, she said, behind the equipment cage. Don't stand up, don't move, don't make a sound. And Kessler, if it goes bad, you do not stop filming. Whatever happens, you do not stop filming, and you do not put that phone down, and you do not hand it to anybody who asks, including me. Yes, Sergeant. Including me, Kessler. Yes, Sergeant. At 10:20, Nora Bishop sat in her car in the barracks parking lot and dialed a number, and a man picked up on the first ring. You don't call me, Rook said. 1400. What? Well, 1400 today, she said. Whitlock ordered me onto the mat with him personally. 40 witnesses. It's lawful. I said yes. The silence on that line was the longest of her life. Nora, don't. Nora, you understand what you've just done. Yes. You have destroyed 6 years of work in one sentence. Yes. You have taken Aaron Vance, Rook said, and his voice broke on the name, which she had never once heard it do, and you have put him in a hole forever because in 3 weeks a lawyer is going to hold up a video of you assaulting an officer, and that's it, Nora. That's the whole thing. That's every hour of the last 6 years. Rook. 6 years. Rook, listen to me. I'm not going to listen to you. He was relieved, Nora said. Silence. When I asked him to order me, she said. His face went soft. He was relieved, Rook. And I've been sitting in a car for 2 hours running it, and there's only one answer, and I want you to tell me I'm wrong. Rook didn't say anything. They want it on video, Nora said. Yeah. They want me putting hands on an officer on camera in front of 40 witnesses 3 weeks before the board. Yeah. So they moved the board toward, Nora said. They asked for the expedited schedule. They pulled it into 3 weeks. And then they sent a message to a 32-year-old captain who's been waiting his whole life for his father to look at him, and they told him to get her on a mat because they don't need me to lose Rook. They need me to win. They need me to hurt him. They need a video of the government's witness breaking an officer's arm in a schoolhouse. Nora. And I've been so busy not touching anybody, she said, and her voice finally for the first time in 4 months did something that I never once asked why they were trying so hard to make me. Rook was quiet. So you're not going to fight him? If I'm fighting him, he said, I'm going to fight him. Nora, I'm going to get on that mat at 1400, Nora said, in front of 40 soldiers and every camera in that building, and I am going to do the single hardest thing I have ever done in 25 years. Which is what? I'm going to lose, she said. At 11:15, Ward walked into the personnel office and put a piece of paper on Rennick's counter. Specialist. Sergeant Major. You went to Hobart. Yes, Sergeant Major. How'd it feel? Rennick thought about it honestly the way she'd started doing since Saturday. Like throwing up, she said. Yeah. Ward tapped the paper. I've got another one. Sergeant Major, I don't want another one. I know. I'm a specialist. I do ID cards. On Friday, I did ID cards. Rennick looked at the paper. She looked at the paper. It was a request for an emergency records retrieval, and it had one name on it, and the name was not Bishop. Rennick's hands went cold. Sergeant Major, this is a KIA file. Yes. This is a KIA file from 2019. Yes. Sergeant Major, I can't pull this. I don't have, this is a casualty record that's not, you'd need a records manager, Ward said. Rennick stared at him. I want you to look at that name, Ward said, and then I want you to look at line 4 where it says next of kin, and then I want you to tell me if you're going to pull it. Rennick looked at line 4. Vance Margaret, mother, Dayton, Ohio. Sergeant Major, who is this? Specialist. In about 3 hours, a woman is going to walk onto a mat and let a captain beat her in front of 40 people, Ward said. And I've had 39 years to learn when I'm looking at something, and I'm looking at it, and I can't stop it, and I can't help her. And the only thing an old man can do today is find out what she's doing it for. Rennick's hands were on the keyboard. Sergeant Major, if I pull, this does it flag? Probably. Does it flag to the same place? Ward said, probably. Rennick looked up at him. Sergeant Major, she said. On the 22nd of March, I asked her if she wanted me to call somebody, and then a captain walked in and I looked at my keyboard and I didn't say anything for 4 months. She hit the key. Not to the At 12:10, Grant Whitlock walked into the pit, and Nora Bishop was already there, sitting on the edge of the mat in PTs, taping her hands. He stopped. "You're early." "So are you, sir." He stood there. He hadn't planned this. He'd come to be alone, which was the thing he had been doing since Saturday, and she was in the one room he had left. "Sergeant." "Sir." "Why'd you ask for it?" Nora kept taping. "Sergeant Bishop, I'm asking you a question." "Sir, do you want the real answer or the one that's good for you?" Whitlock's jaw worked. "The real one, because you wanted it," she said. "What? You've wanted it since March. You didn't know you wanted it, but you did. And I've been standing in front of you for 4 months not giving it to you, and I want you to understand something, sir. And this is the only decent thing I'm going to share to you today." She looked up. "I could have given it to you in March. I could have put you on your back in about 4 seconds in March in front of your whole school, and everything would be different and none of it would be better." "That's a hell of a thing to say." "Yes, sir." "You think you can beat me?" "Sir?" "You're 44. "Yes, sir." "You're 5'7" and you weigh 140 pounds soaking sweat, and you've been sweeping my floor for 4 months. "Yes, sir." Whitlock laughed, and it came out wrong. It came out thin. "Sergeant, do you know what I benched this morning?" "No, sir." 315. "Congratulations, sir." "Say what you want to say." Nora bit the tape. "Sir, in 11 years, nobody's told you no," she said. "That's not an insult. That's a diagnosis. Every man you've ever rolled with in this building has known who your father is, and they've all made the same decision at the same moment, which is the moment where they could take it and they don't. And you've felt that 400 times, and you've never once known what it was. And that's why your guillotine's bad, and that's why Petrelli's arm broke. And that's why a kid seized on your mat and you never said his name." Whitlock stood there. "Get off my mat," he said quietly. "Yes, sir." She stood up. "Sergeant." She stopped. "What did my father say to you?" Grant said. Nora turned around. "Sir, in March." His voice had gone somewhere small. "On the 11th. Petrelli said he was in this building for 90 minutes, and I've been up for 2 nights, and I can't remember one word he said to me, Sergeant. I can remember what we ate. I can remember he was here, and I can't remember one word." Nora Bishop looked at Grant Whitlock for 4 full seconds. "Sir," she said, "I didn't meet your father in March." "You didn't?" "No, sir." "Then when?" And Nora said Kunar, 2019. He was a colonel. Grant Whitlock's face did not move at all. "Get out," he said. "Yes, sir." "Get out of my building." 1400, sir," said Nora, and walked out. Grant Whitlock stood alone in his own school and did not move for 11 minutes. At 12:50, Petrelli sat in a rental car with a green notebook and a phone and made the second call. "Benning Sergeant Major Ostrowski." "Ozzy." "Doug." A pause. "You're supposed to be in Georgia." "I'm in Georgia." "How's the validation?" "Ozzy, I need the roster." "I gave you the roster." "I need the other one," Petrelli said. Silence. "Doug." "Ozzy, I need the other roster." "There's one roster." "There's two," Petrelli said. "There's the one you print, and there's the one in the safe. And I know there's two, because I've been on both of them since 2011, and I've never said that out loud until this exact second." The line was quiet for 11 seconds. "Doug," Ostrowski said, and his voice had changed completely. "Who's asking?" "Me." "Doug, who's asking?" "Ozzy, there's a woman here who's about to get taken apart in about an hour in front of 40 soldiers because a captain read a name off a list and it wasn't there. And I'm standing here holding a clipboard that I know is a lie, and I read it out loud this morning, Ozzy. I read it out loud in front of 40 kids, and I watched her face, and she didn't blink, and I've never been more ashamed of anything in my life." Ostrowski said, "What's the name?" "Bishop." "There's no Bishop." "I know there's no Bishop. That's what I said this morning." "Doug," Ostrowski's voice dropped. "Listen to me, there is no Bishop on either roster." Petrelli's hand tightened on the phone. "Then check the other thing." "What other thing?" "Ozzy checked the mat bags." "The what?" "The inventory," Petrelli said. 2011, the schoolhouse that isn't in the catalog. Every instructor had a bag, and every bag had a name stenciled on it, and it's a supply document. Ozzy, it's not a personnel document, And nobody in the history of the United States Army has ever classified a supply document. Silence. Then very slowly, "What am I looking for?" "Widow," Petrelli said. He heard a chair. He heard a door. He heard 1,100 miles away, a sergeant major of the United States Army walk to a filing cabinet that had not been opened in a decade. 4 minutes. "Doug, say it." "There's a bag," Ostrowski said. "Say the name." "Doug, I'm looking at a hand receipt from 2011 for one mat bag, one issued to an instructor, and the name block says widow. And there's a signature, and Doug, the signature isn't a name, it's a number." "Read me the number." Ostrowski read him the number. Petrelli wrote it on the back of his hand and looked at it and said, "Ozzy, that's not a service number." "No, that's a DIA control number." "Doug," Ostrowski said, "I'm going to have to put this back in the drawer, and I'm going to forget I ever picked it up, and you're going to do something with it, and I want you to know that I've got 9 months to retirement and a daughter at Auburn, and I did it anyway." "Ozzy, don't say anything nice to me, Doug. I'll cry." The line went dead. Petrelli sat in a rental car in a parking lot in Georgia and looked at a number on the back of his hand. Then he got out of the car and started walking fast. At 13:20, Hobart's phone rang, and it was a number with no area code. "Colonel Hobart?" "Colonel," the woman with no name. "Cancel it." Hobart stood up. "You cancel it." "Colonel, I can't cancel a training event at a schoolhouse that's yours, and you've got 40 minutes. You told me on Sunday that if I moved her, it reads as flight. I'm not asking you to move her. I'm asking you to cancel a fight." "Ma'am, what changed?" Silence. "Ma'am, on Sunday you sat in a diner and told me to make my decision awake. So what changed between Sunday and now?" The woman said, "We got the defense witness list." Hobart went cold. And there's a name on it that shouldn't be on it." "Whose?" "Colonel." "Whose name?" The woman said, "Captain Grant Whitlock." Hobart sat down. "He's a witness for the defense." "He's the first witness for the defense," the woman said. "He's the lead. They're not putting a general on that stand and hoping. They're putting his son on it first, and his son is going to say under oath that the government's witness came to his schoolhouse, lied about her credentials, disobeyed lawful orders, and assaulted him." "He hasn't assaulted anybody." "Colonel, it's 13:21. Hobart couldn't breathe. "He doesn't know," she said. "What? He doesn't know he's on the list." Hobart was standing again. "Ma'am, that boy has called his father 11 times since Saturday and got in a captain named Kelly every time. His father cut him off Saturday morning. They cut him off and put him on a witness list and didn't tell him, and he's about to walk onto a mat in 39 minutes and manufacture his own testimony, and he doesn't know." The woman said, "Colonel, he doesn't know." "Colonel, that's not our problem." And Ruth Hobart said something she had not said to a superior in 22 years, and then she hung up and ran. At 13:31, Grant Whitlock was in his office putting on a rash guard when the door opened without a knock. "Sergeant Major, I don't have—" It wasn't Ward. Douglas Petrelli shut the door behind him and put his back against it. "Captain, get out." "Captain, sit down." "Sergeant Major, I have 29 minutes, and I am not doing this with you." Petrelli held up his hand. There was a number written on the back of it in ballpoint. "Do you know what that is?" he said. "I don't care what that is." "Captain, I've got 29 minutes too, so I'm going to talk fast, and you're going to stand there." Petrelli's voice was absolutely level. "That is a Defense Intelligence Agency control number. It was signed on a hand receipt at Fort Benning in 2011 for one mat bag issued to an instructor whose name block says widow. And in 2011, I spent 9 weeks at a schoolhouse that is not in any catalog getting taken apart by that instructor. And this morning I stood in your pit and read a roster out loud and told 40 kids her name isn't on it. And Captain, it isn't. It isn't on it because she was never on a roster. She was the thing they built the roster to hide." Grant Whitlock stood with a rash guard half over his head. "You're lying. Captain, you're lying. You've hated me for 4 years. You've been waiting 4 years." Captain asked me the question. "What?" "This morning," Petrelli said, "in your pit, I offered it to you in front of 40 people, and you didn't take it, and I've been sick about it since 08-11. So I'm offering it one more time, and there is not going to be a third." Grant Whitlock's hands were shaking. Ask me if she's qualified, Petrelli said. And Grant Whitlock said, is she qualified? Petrelli's eyes closed. Captain. He said she wrote it. Silence. What? The half that works, Petrelli said. Everybody in this army thinks I wrote it. I've had 14 years of people shaking my hand for it. And I've been trying to give it back for 14 years, and there was nobody to give it back to because she doesn't exist because they made her not exist. And Captain, this morning I read a piece of paper out loud that says she doesn't exist, and she stood there in the second rank and let me do it. Grant Whitlock sat down on the edge of his desk. Sergeant Major, my father. Say it. My father told me she was coming. When? April, Grant said, and his voice was gone. April. He called me in April, and he said, battalion's going to send you somebody who's going to try to run your school, and I want you to be ready. And I asked him, ready how? And he said, what did he say, Captain? Grant Whitlock looked up at the man whose arm he'd broken. He said, document everything, he said. The office was silent. He said, document everything. Grant said again, and something in his face came apart. And I did. Sergeant Major, I did. I've got 4 months of it. I've got a memo. I've got an email chain. I've got a video of her disobeying a direct order during a medical emergency. I built a hole. I've been building a hole. He stopped. Captain Petrelli said quietly, who's it for? Grant Whitlock did not answer. Because at 13:36 on a Monday afternoon in Georgia, Captain Grant Whitlock, finally at last 4 months late, understood what he had been doing since March, and who had asked him to do it, and why his father had come to his schoolhouse for 90 minutes 11 days before a woman arrived, and had walked his mat, and had never once in 4 months on 11 phone calls asked him how he was. I deleted them, he whispered. What? Saturday, Grant said. He called me Saturday and told me to cancel it, and I said, you're on all my emails. Dad, there's a paper trail you told me to keep you copied, and he hung up on me. He looked at Petrelli. And I sat here for 3 hours and 20 minutes, and I deleted 411 emails. Petrelli said, oh, Captain. Sergeant Major, what did I do? Captain, get up. What did I do? Get up. We've got 22 minutes. Get up. At 13:42, Hobart came through the door of the pit at a dead run and stopped because it was full. It wasn't 40. It was 110. It was every soldier in that battalion who wasn't on a detail, and about 30 who were, and they were standing along the walls 3 deep and out into the hallway, and nobody had told them to come, and nobody had told them not to. And Ruth Hobart stood in the doorway of her own battalion's combative school and understood that she had lost control of the day at approximately 08:11 that morning. Ward was at the back. She found him. Sergeant Major, what is this? That's the Army, ma'am. Nobody ordered this. No, ma'am. Then how? Ma'am, Ward said. Cade read his self-report out loud at 08:10 and 40 kids heard him do it. And by 10:00 it was in the motor pool. And by 11 it was in the DFAC. And by noon there wasn't a soldier on this post who didn't know that a staff sergeant with 14 years lit himself on fire because a woman with a broom told him to. Hobart looked at the room. Sergeant Major, she's going to lose. Yes, ma'am. You know that. Ma'am, she called it herself, Ward said. At 12:10, she came by my office and she said, Sergeant Major, at 1400, I'm going to lose. And I want you to be in the room and I want you to watch every second and I want you to remember it because in 3 weeks, somebody's going to ask you what you saw. That's not a plan. No, ma'am. Sergeant Major, that's not a plan. That's a woman letting a man beat her. Ma'am, Ward said. I've been in 39 years and I've watched a lot of people win things and I've never once seen anybody do what she's about to do. And I've been standing here for 20 minutes trying to think of a word for it, and the only one I can come up with is the wrong one. What is it, love? Ward said. At 13:51, Nora Bishop stood at the edge of the mat and looked at a room with 110 people in it. Reyes was at her shoulder. Sergeant, Reyes, you don't have to do this. Yes, I do. Sergeant, there's 100 people in here. I know. Sergeant, I've been a level 3 for 6 years, and I've never rolled in front of more than 12, and there's 110 people in here, and they're all here because they heard you're the real thing, and they want to see it, and Sergeant, if you go out there and lose in front of them, Reyes, they'll never look at you again. Yes, Nora said. Reyes stopped. Sergeant? That's the price, Nora said. That's what it costs, and I want you to watch me pay it, And I want you to remember for the rest of your career that this is what it looks like, because someday somebody's going to hand you the same bill and you're going to want to know. Reyes's eyes were wet and she was furious about it. Sergeant, that's the worst thing I've ever heard. Yes, Nora said, it is. At 13:58, Kessler was behind the equipment cage in the back corner, with his phone at chest height and his back against a rack and his heart going like a bird. At 13:59, Grant Whitlock walked out of his office. He was in a rash guard and shorts, and there was something wrong with his face, and Petrelli came out behind him and stopped at the wall. The room went dead quiet. Whitlock walked to the center of the mat. He looked at Nora Bishop. And Nora Bishop looked at him and saw it, and her stomach dropped through the floor because his face was not relieved anymore. His face was the face of a man who had found out at 13:36 who he was. Sergeant Bishop, he said, and his voice carried front and center. She stepped onto the mat. 110 people did not breathe. Sir, Sergeant, this morning at 08:11, I gave you a lawful order to demonstrate the level 4 task list against me at 1400 hours. Yes, sir. In front of this formation. Yes, sir. Whitlock looked out at the room, at 110 faces, at Ward at the back, at Hobart in the doorway, at Reyes, at Cade, at a staff sergeant who had burned 14 years on a Sunday, and Captain Grant Whitlock said, I withdraw it. The room detonated. It came apart, 110 people talking at once, and Whitlock stood in the middle of it and raised his voice for the first time in his life for a reason that wasn't himself. At ease. It cut through. Combative school, Whitlock said, and everybody else who's not supposed to be in this building, listen to me one time. This morning I stood on this mat and told you a sergeant major from Fort Benning said Sergeant Bishop's name wasn't on a roster. Silence. He offered me a question, Whitlock said. Twice. He offered it to me in front of all of you at 08:11, and I didn't take it, and he offered it to me in my office 23 minutes ago, and I took it, and I want to say it out loud because I said the other thing out loud, and it isn't fair to do one and not the other. He turned. Sergeant Major Petrelli, he said, is Sergeant First Class Bishop qualified? And Douglas Petrelli, 6'4", 240, standing against the wall of the school he'd been thrown out of, said, Captain, she trained me. The room made a sound that Nora Bishop would hear for the rest of her life. Say it again, Whitlock said. She trained me, Petrelli said. In 2011, 9 weeks, at a place I can't name. She broke my nose in week 2, and then she sat down on the mat next to me while I bled and taught me the only thing I know worth knowing. He was crying and did not care. And every one of you has been taught out of a book with my name on it, and my name shouldn't be on it, and I've been carrying that for 14 years, and I'm putting it down right now in front of all of you. Nobody moved. Sergeant Bishop, Whitlock said, Sir, I'm not going to fight you. Sir, do you understand why Nora Bishop looked at him and for the first time in 4 months felt something she had absolutely no plan for? No, sir, she said and meant it. Because at 13:36, Grant Whitlock said, I found out that I've been building a case against you since April and that I've got 4 months of documentation and that I did every single piece of it because a man called me on the telephone and told me to be ready. And Sergeant, I have called that man 11 times since Saturday morning and he will not pick up the phone. Hobart said from the doorway, Captain, ma'am, I'm not finished. Captain, stop talking right now. That's an order. Ma'am, respectfully, Grant Whitlock said. No. He turned back to the room. I want everybody in this building to hear me say that on the 11th of March, Brigadier General Marcus Whitlock came to this school for 90 minutes with no escort, 11 days before Sergeant Bishop got here, and I have spent 4 months believing he came to see me. He stopped. He didn't come to see me, he said. And Nora Bishop, standing on a mat in Georgia in front of 110 soldiers, watched a 32-year-old man say the truest sentence of his life and understood with a clarity that felt like cold water that she had been wrong about him for 4 months and that she did not have time to be glad about it. Because if he wasn't going to fight her, then the video didn't exist. Then the plan had failed. Then somebody right now, 1,100 miles away, was finding out. Sir, Nora said, get off the mat. What? Sir, get off the mat. Get out of this building right now. Sergeant. Sir, you just told 110 witnesses that your father came here in March and that you've been documenting me since April. And you did it at 14:02 on the record with every phone in this room up. And sir, you are now the single most valuable thing in this entire case. And you have no idea. Grant Whitlock's face went white. Sergeant, sir, who was your evidence for? I don't know. Sir, you built 4 months of documentation on a general's instruction, and you deleted the emails on Saturday. Who told you to delete them? He did. Why would he tell you to delete a case he asked you to build? And Grant Whitlock said in a voice like a child, because it wasn't for the Army. The doors at the back of the pit opened. A woman came in. Nobody knew her. She was in a suit and she had no name, and she walked straight through 110 soldiers who moved out of her way without knowing why. She stopped at the edge of the mat. Sergeant Bishop. Ma'am, it's over. Nora didn't move, agreed Rue. Say that in a complete sentence, she said. And the woman with no name said, Brigadier General Marcus Whitlock submitted his retirement papers at 13:47 this afternoon, effective immediately, and at 13:52, the board vacated the schedule. The room did not understand. Nora Bishop understood instantly, and it took the floor out from under her. No, she said. Sergeant? No, he can't. Sergeant, he can. He retires and the board vacates, Nora said, and her voice was rising, and she could not stop it. And it was the first time in 4 months, and 110 people were watching. He retires and there's no board, there's no room, there's no testimony. He walks out with a star and a pension and a flag, and Aaron stays what they made him. That's it. That's what happens. He just walks. Sergeant Bishop. 6 years. The pit was absolutely silent. Nora Bishop stood in the middle of a mat with 110 soldiers watching and heard herself and stopped. Sergeant, the woman said quietly. Timestamps. Nora went still. What? 13:47, the woman said. He filed at 13:47. Your captain started talking at 14:02. She looked at Grant Whitlock. He didn't retire because of what happened in this room, Sergeant. He retired 15 minutes before it. The floor tilted. He knew, Nora said. He knew. How? And Anna Rennick's voice came from the doorway, small and shaking, holding a piece of paper in both hands. Ma'am, I think that's me. Every head in that pit turned. Specialist Anna Rennick stood in the doorway holding a single sheet of paper in both hands like it weighed 40 pounds. Specialist, the woman with no name said, Come here. Ma'am, I don't think I'm supposed to. Specialist walk. Rennick walked. 110 soldiers moved out of her way, and she walked through them with her chin down and her ears burning and stopped at the edge of the mat. Say it, the woman said. Ma'am, at 11:20 this morning, Command Sergeant Major Ward asked me to pull a casualty file. Whose? Vance Aaron, Sergeant. Killed in action, Kunar Province, 2019. Nora Bishop closed her eyes. And I pulled it, ma'am, at 11:26. Rennick's hands were shaking so hard the paper made a sound. And it flagged. It flagged immediately, ma'am. And I watched it flag, and I sat there, and I watched the screen tell me the inquiry had been logged and I'd be contacted. Specialist, the woman said. Who did it notify? Ma'am, that's the thing. Rennick looked up. It doesn't say. It never says. But I'm the records manager, and I've been the records manager for 2 years. And about an hour later, I went into the audit log because I wanted to know what I'd done, and ma'am, there's an entry. Read it. 11:27, Rennick said. Automated notification, recipient block redacted, delivery status delivered. She swallowed. And then at 11:29, there's a second entry, and it's not automated. It's a read receipt, and the terminal ID is the same one that pulled Sergeant Bishop's record 5 times since March. The pit was silent. Ma'am, and Rennick said, I lit him up. I pulled a dead man's file at 11:26, and a phone went off in the Pentagon 2 minutes later, and I did that. Nora Bishop opened her eyes. Rennick, Sergeant, I'm sorry. Rennick, look at me. Sergeant, I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't. Specialist Rennick, Nora said, look at me. Rennick looked at her. At 11:26 this morning, Nora said, you told a man who's been running for 6 years that somebody had found Aaron. Rennick's face crumpled. And at 13:47, Nora said, "He quit." "Sergeant, that's bad." "No," Nora said slowly. "No specialist. That's the first honest thing that man has done since 2019. Ward's voice came from the back of the room. "Ma'am." Everybody turned. "Ma'am," Command Sergeant Major Elias Ward said to the woman with no name. "You said the board vacated the schedule." "That's correct." "Vacated," Ward said. "Not dismissed." The woman looked at him for a long moment. "That's correct," she said. "Say the difference out loud, ma'am. There's 110 soldiers in this room who've just watched something and they don't know what they watched, and I'd like them to know." The woman turned and faced the room, which she had not planned to do and would think about for a long time afterward. "A board is convened to determine whether an officer should be separated," she said. "If the officer retires, the board has nothing to decide, so it vacates. It doesn't rule, it doesn't find, it just stops." Reyes said from somewhere in the crowd, "So he wins." "Sergeant, he wins," Reyes said louder. "That's what you're saying. He puts in his papers at 1347 and the whole thing evaporates and he goes home with a star." "Yes." The room made a sound like a wound. "But," the woman said, and it cut through everything. Silence. "A board vacates," she said, "and Article 32 doesn't." Nora Bishop's head came up so fast it hurt. "Say that again," she said. "Sergeant, say it again." "There's no Article 32, the woman said. "There has never been an Article 32. There has been an administrative separation board because 6 years ago, somebody made a determination that what happened in Kunar was a records handling issue, and records handling issues go to boards, and boards go away when men retire." "Who made that determination?" Ward said. "That's a very good question. Sergeant Major and I have been asking it since March." Nora took a step forward. "Ma'am," she said, "you just told 110 people that the only proceeding against Marcus Whitlock in 6 years was administrative." "Yes." "Ma'am, I have been sitting on a testimony for 6 years and eating a broom for 4 months because you people told me there was one room and one chance, and if I so much as breathed wrong, the room closed." "Yes." "Was that true?" The woman with no name did not answer for 4 seconds. "It was true," she said, "of the room we had." And Nora Bishop understood, and the understanding was so large it came in sideways. "You never had a case," she said. Silence. "You never had a case. That's why the board. That's why 6 years. You had a recording and a transcript that didn't match, and one witness with a leg full of metal, and no name, and you couldn't put me on a stand because putting me on a stand means putting the program on a stand, and you couldn't unseal me, and you couldn't corroborate me, and so you built the smallest, quietest, ugliest proceeding you could find, and you told me it was the room. Sergeant, you told me it was the room. Sergeant Bishop, I need you to stop talking." "No," Nora said, and 110 soldiers flinched. "No, ma'am, not one more time. I've stopped talking for 6 years. I stopped talking in a hospital in Landstuhl. I stopped talking at his funeral. I stopped talking when his mother called me, and I let it go to voicemail because I wasn't allowed to say the word Kunar to a woman whose son died there. I have stopped talking on demand for 6 years, and I want you to say out loud in front of these people whether there was ever a single day when I was going to get to say it." The pit was so quiet the lights hummed, and the woman with no name said no. Nora Bishop did not move. "There was never a day," the woman said. "The board would have separated him quietly with a general officer memorandum of reprimand in his file, and the file would have been sealed, and Margaret Vance would never have been told anything. And I have known that since March, and I did not tell you because you were the only thing keeping it alive. And if you had known, you would have stopped." The silence went on and on. Then Grant Whitlock said, "Ma'am," everybody had forgotten he was there. He was still standing in the middle of the mat in a rash guard, 32 years old with nothing left. "Ma'am," he said, "what's an Article 32? "Captain, you said a board vacates and an Article 32 doesn't. What's an Article 32? "Captain, you're an officer, you know what an Article 32 is." "Then say what it's for," Grant said. And the woman with no name looked at him for a long moment and said, "It's the preliminary hearing before a court-martial. For a crime, not a records handling issue. No." "So what would it take?" Grant Whitlock said. "Captain?" "Ma'am, what would it take to make it a crime?" And the woman with no name said the 4 words that broke the entire 6 years open. A living witness, she said, who isn't classified. Nobody in that room moved. And then Grant Whitlock said, "Ma'am, I've got 4 months of documentation." The woman turned very, very slowly. "Say that again," she said. "I've got 4 months of documentation," Grant said. "Emails, memos, notes. I built a case against Sergeant Bishop starting in April because a general officer called me on the telephone and told me to be ready and to document everything, and I did it, ma'am. I did every single piece of it, and I've got the whole thing." "Captain, you deleted it." "Yes, ma'am." "You deleted 411 items on Saturday." "Yes, ma'am." And Specialist Anna Rennick said, "Ma'am, no, he didn't." The woman with no name closed her eyes. "Specialist," she said, "say that in a complete sentence." "Ma'am, the Federal Records Act requires journaling," Rennick said. "Everything in a .mil mailbox gets copied to an archive at the moment of delivery. You can delete your mailbox. You can't delete the archive. The archive isn't yours." She held up the paper. "It's mine. I'm the records manager. It's an extra duty. Nobody wanted it." "How many items?" 411, ma'am." "How many to the general?" 91, Rennick said, "between the 14th of April and the 20th of July. 91 emails from Captain Whitlock to Brigadier General Marcus Whitlock, courtesy copy unclassified about Sergeant First Class Nora Bishop." The woman with no name put a hand on the equipment rack. "Ma'am," Rennick said, "Specialist, I want you to understand something," the woman said, and her voice had gone strange. "For 6 years, the entire United States government could not put one document in front of a judge that connected Marcus Whitlock to Nora Bishop. Not one. Everything he touched was classified, which meant we couldn't use it, or it was deniable, which meant we couldn't prove it." "Ma'am." "And you're telling me," the woman said, "that he spent 4 months writing to his son about her in an unclassified mailbox 91 times. "Yes, ma'am." "Because he thought his son was writing to him." "Ma'am, I don't understand." "Specialist," the woman said, "he wasn't building a case against her. He was building a paper trail that proved he was watching her. And he did it on a channel he thought was his son's, because who audits a father emailing a son?" Grant Whitlock said very quietly, "I do." Everybody looked at him. "I audit it," he said. "I've audited it my whole life. Every email, every phone call, I've saved all of it since I was a lieutenant. I've got a folder. I've got a folder called Dad, and it's got 11 years in it because I thought someday somebody would ask me what he was like, and I'd want to be able to." He stopped. "Captain," the woman said. "It's on my personal drive," Grant said. "At my house. Off the network. 11 years. "Captain, don't say another word." "Ma'am?" "Captain Whitlock, I am telling you as a friend, which I am not, stop talking, because the next thing out of your mouth makes you a witness against your own father in a capital adjacent proceeding, and you cannot take it back, and you are 32 years old and you have not slept in 3 days." Grant Whitlock stood in the middle of a mat in front of 110 soldiers. "Ma'am," he said, "what happened in Kunar?" The woman said, "Captain." "Ma'am, I've asked 11 times in 3 days, and everybody in this room knows except me. Somebody tell me what my father did." Nobody said anything. And then Nora Bishop said, "Sir, sit down." "Sergeant." "Sir, sit down on the mat because your legs are going to go, and I've watched it happen 400 times, and I'd rather you were already down." Grant Whitlock sat down on the mat, and Nora Bishop, 44 years old, 25 years in, sat down across from him, and 110 soldiers in a combative school in Georgia stood absolutely still and listened to a woman say a thing out loud for the first time in 6 years. 5th of October, 2019, she said. "Kunar Province, 9,000 feet. 12 of us on a ridge at 0400. It was an observation mission, and it was not supposed to be anything. Sergeant?" "Sir, let me get through it." Grant shut his mouth. "There was an element in the draw below us," Nora said. 40, maybe 50. And they didn't know we were there, and we didn't know they were there, and at 0411 a rock moved, and everybody found out at the same time." She looked at her hands. "My leg opened up in the first 30 seconds. Femur and the artery, and I went down 40 meters below the crest behind a rock, and I could not move, and I could not do anything except lie there and listen to a radio." "Whose radio?" "Aaron's." Nora's voice did not change at all, which was the worst part. "Sergeant Aaron Vance," she said. 23 years old, from Dayton, Ohio. He'd been in 4 years. He had a sister named Kara and a truck he was rebuilding, and he could not tell a joke to save his life. He was the worst. He'd get to the end and forget the end. Somebody in the crowd made a sound, and the call came down, Nora said, from a colonel at a TOC 11 miles away who was looking at a screen, and the call was withdraw. Grant Whitlock said, "My father." "Colonel Marcus Whitlock," Nora said. "Yes, sir." "Why?" "Because we weren't supposed to be there," Nora said. The room went cold. "Say that again," Grant whispered. "Sir, we were 400 meters over a line that was on a map in a building in Kabul, and there was an agreement, and the agreement said we weren't there. And at 04:11:12, Americans started shooting on the wrong side of a line that didn't exist, and a colonel 11 miles away had about 90 seconds to decide what kind of man he was. And he called withdraw. He called withdraw. To make it not have happened." "Sir, to make it not have happened," Nora said. Grant Whitlock put both hands flat on the mat. "And Aaron?" Aaron said no. The pit did not breathe. "He said it on an open net," Nora said. "He said, and I'm going to say it exactly because I have said it to myself every single day for 6 years, and I would like somebody else to have it. He said negative, negative, we have wounded below the crest we are holding until they're up. And the colonel said, withdraw. That's an order, and Aaron said, sir, if we withdraw, they die, and the colonel said, withdraw. Silence. And Aaron said, Nora said, I acknowledge the order. I'm not going to comply. Send whatever you have to send. Somebody in the back of that room started crying and did not stop. And they held, Nora said, 4 hours. 11 men came off that ridge, and I was one of them because a 23-year-old boy from Dayton, Ohio told a colonel no on an open net at 9,000 feet, and then he was the last one and he didn't come off. Grant Whitlock's face was wet, and he did not seem to know. And the transcript, Nora said the transcript that his mother got, the one that's in the file, the one that's in the packet, hand you with the flag says that Sergeant Aaron Vance called for a withdrawal at 04:14 and that the element withdrew in disorder and that his death occurred during an unauthorized movement. That's a lie. Sir, that's a rewrite, Nora said. There's a difference and it's important. Nobody made anything up. Somebody took a recording and made a transcript and made choices, and the choices took a boy who said no and made him a boy who panicked, and the choices took a colonel who ordered 11 men to take and made him a colonel who tried to save them. Where's the recording? That's the part, Nora said, that I would go to prison for. Grant Whitlock looked at her. You have it, he said. Sir, Sergeant, you have it. Sir, if I had a recording of a classified operation on the wrong side of a border, Nora said, and I had kept it for 6 years, then I would have committed 11 felonies, and every one of them would be true. And the first thing any lawyer would do is put me in a room and ask me about the felonies instead of about Aaron. That's why there was never a room, sir. It was never that they didn't believe me. It's that I'm radioactive. I've been radioactive since 2019, and everybody in this building thought I was a fraud, and the truth is I'm worse. I'm worse than a fraud. A fraud is just a liar. I'm evidence that can't be used. The woman with no name said quietly, that's the most accurate thing anybody's said in 6 years. Nora looked up at her. Ma'am, Sergeant, you said a living witness who isn't classified. Yes. Ma'am, there were 11 of us. The woman with no name stood very, very still. Sergeant Bishop, she said, don't. Ma'am, there were 11 men who walked off that ridge. Sergeant, and 10 of them aren't me, Nora said. 10 of them are conventional. 10 of them were attached, ma'am. They were attached from a line unit for a mission they were told was a route recon, and they've been sitting in Ohio and Texas and Fort Bragg for 6 years thinking the transcript was true, thinking a kid panicked, thinking they ran. Nora Bishop stood up. 10 men, she said, have spent 6 years believing they ran off a mountain and left a boy to die because he lost his nerve. And they're not classified, ma'am. They're just wrong. They're just 10 Americans who were lied to about the worst day of their lives, and every single one of them can be subpoenaed, and every single one of them was on that net. Sergeant, they don't remember. It was 6 years ago. It was 4 a.m. It was. Ma'am, one of them does. The pit went dead. Say his name, the woman said. Ma'am, I'm not going to say his name in this room. Sergeant, if you have a corroborating witness, Ma'am, I've had a corroborating witness for 6 years, Nora said. And every single time I brought him up, somebody in an office told me that a conventional NCO's memory of a radio call at 0400 under fire 6 years ago is not a case, and that if I went to him, it was witness tampering, and that if he came forward on his own, it was hearsay. And I want you to understand something, ma'am, and I'd like these 110 soldiers to understand it too. She turned and faced the room. They weren't lying to me, she said. Every single thing they told me was true. It wasn't a case. It's not enough. You can't put a man on a stand and say, what did you hear on a radio in 2019 and when? That's real. That's not a conspiracy, that's just how it works. And I have spent 6 years being told the truth by people who were trying to help me, and it did not matter, because the truth was that I did not have enough. Nobody moved. And this morning, Nora said, at 14:02, a 32-year-old captain stood on this mat in front of 110 witnesses and said his father called him in April and told him to document a woman he'd never met. The woman with no name did not breathe. That's not Kunar, Nora said. That's not classified. That's not 6 years ago. That's 4 months ago in Georgia, and it's got 91 emails and a records manager and 110 witnesses and a general officer who filed his retirement 15 minutes before it happened. She turned back. Ma'am, you can't try him for Kunar. No. Ma'am, you can try him for me. The woman with no name put both hands over her face for about 2 seconds, which was the only time in her entire career that she had ever done it in front of anybody. Obstruction, she said. Ma'am, witness intimidation, conspiracy, unlawful influence. Her voice was rising, actually rising. He interfered with a protected witness in a pending proceeding through a subordinate officer over a 4-month period and documented every second of it in his own hand in an unclassified mailbox because he thought he was talking to his son. Yes, ma'am. And an Article 32 doesn't vacate when you retire, the woman said. Because retirement doesn't get you out of the UC, MJ retirement puts you on the retired list. And the repealed list is still subject to the code, and a man who files his papers at 1347 to run from an administrative board just walked directly into the only jurisdiction that could actually reach him. Grant Whitlock said from the mat, Ma'am, Captain, am I part of it? The pit went silent. Captain, the woman said carefully, you're going to want a lawyer. Ma'am, am I part of it? Captain? Ma'am, Grant Whitlock was on his feet. I built it. I wrote the memos. I tore up her file in front of 40 soldiers. I put a broom in her hands. I made her read a card. I ordered her onto a mat this morning at 0811. And I meant it, ma'am. I want to be very clear in front of everybody. At 0811, I meant it. Am I part of it? Yes, the woman said. Grant Whitlock nodded. Okay, he said. Captain, you're also the government's witness, and those two things are going to live in the same room for about 18 months, and it's going to be the worst 18 months of your life. Yes, ma'am. Captain, do you understand what you're doing? And Grant Whitlock said, Ma'am, my whole life, my father told me who to be ready for, and I was always ready. And I want somebody to explain to me how a man can be that good at telling his son who the enemy is and never once be wrong on purpose. Nobody said anything. He was never wrong, Grant said. That's the part. He was never wrong. He was just never telling me the truth about why. He looked at Nora. Sergeant Bishop. Sir, I'd like to apologize. Sir, don't. Sergeant. Sir, don't do it here, Nora said. Not in front of 110 people. Because if you do it here, it's for them, and I've had 4 months of you doing things for a room. Grant Whitlock stood there and took it. Yes, Sergeant, he said. Sir, do it in 18 months, Nora said, on a stand under oath when it costs you everything. That's the only apology I want, and it's the only one that's worth anything, and you know it. Yes, Sergeant. Command Sergeant Major Ward said from the back, Sergeant Bishop. Nora turned. Sergeant Major, you've got 110 soldiers in this building, Ward said, and they came here to see you fight, and there's no fight, and in about 4 minutes, they're going to walk out of here and go tell everybody on this post what happened, and I want to make sure they've got it right. Sergeant Major, so I'm going to ask you one thing, Ward said, and it's the same thing I asked you in my office 3 weeks ago with the door shut. The room went still. Are you a master trainer? Nora Bishop stood on a mat in Georgia. Yes, Sergeant Major. Under the name Bishop. No Sergeant Major. Under what name? And Nora Bishop said, Sergeant Major, I've never had one. Ward's face didn't move. Say that again. I went in 2001, she said. I was 19. And in 2006, somebody asked me if I wanted to do something that didn't have a name. And I said yes because I was 24 and I was stupid and because nobody had ever asked me for anything before. And I signed something, and after that, there wasn't a roster, and after that, there wasn't a school, and after that, there wasn't a name. The pit was silent. Sergeant Major, everybody in this room has a record, Nora said. You've got a shadow box. You've got 26 years of paper in a drawer at your house, and someday your grandkids are going to open it and find out who you were. And that's not a small thing. That's the thing. That's what the paper is for. Her voice did something. I don't have one, she said. I've got one page, and the page says nothing, and it's going to say nothing when I die, and there's not going to be a shadow box, and there's not going to be a drawer, and that was the deal, and I made it, and I'd make it again. She looked out at 110 faces. But Aaron had one, she said. Aaron had a page. Aaron had a mother in Dayton who got a flag in a packet with a transcript in it, and somebody wrote on his page, and I have been standing in this building for 4 months, letting you laugh at mine, because mine is blank, and I don't care about blank, but you don't get to write lies on his. Nobody moved. That's it, Nora said. That's the whole thing. That's 25 years. And then Douglas Petrelli, 6'4" and 240 from the wall said, school. 110 people turned. Combatives school, Petrelli said, and everybody else who's not supposed to be here. He stepped onto the mat. And Sergeant Major Douglas Petrelli, Fort Benning, Senior Combatives Evaluator of the United States Army, went to attention in front of a Sergeant First Class and rendered a hand salute. Nobody had ever seen anything like it in their lives. Sergeant Major, Nora said, stop it. No, ma'am. Doug. Ma'am, I've had 14 years. And then Reyes came out of the crowd and went to attention, and Cade came out and went to attention, and then it went through that room like water through a broken dam, 110 soldiers coming to attention in a combative school on a Monday afternoon in Georgia with nobody having called it, and Nora Bishop stood in the middle of it with absolutely nothing left. Stop, she said. Nobody stopped. Stop it, she said. I'm an E7, you can't stop. Nobody stopped. And Nora Bishop, who had not cried at Landstuhl or at the funeral, or in 4 months or in 6 years, put her hand over her mouth in front of 110 soldiers and could not stop it. 11 months later, on a Tuesday in September, a woman in a suit with no name stood in a courtroom at Fort Belvoir and said, the government calls Sergeant First Class Nora Bishop. She walked up the aisle. Marcus Whitlock was at the defense table. He was 63 now, and he looked exactly the same. And that was the thing she had not prepared for, that a man could do that and look exactly the same. He watched her walk. He did it warmly. He did it right up to the second she passed him, and then for about a quarter of a second she saw it. He was relieved. And Nora Bishop understood on her way to a witness stand at Fort Belvoir the last thing there was to understand about Marcus Whitlock, which was that he had wanted to be caught since 2019 and had not been able to make himself do it, and had spent 6 years arranging the world so that somebody else would. She sat down. She swore to tell the truth. Sergeant Bishop, the prosecutor said, are you a master trainer in modern Army combatives? Yes, ma'am. Is your name on the roster? No, ma'am. Why not? Because I've never had a name to put on it. Sergeant, between March and July of last year, did the accused's son, Captain Grant Whitlock, tear up your personnel record in front of a formation of 40 soldiers? Yes, ma'am. How did that feel? Defense stood up. Objection, relevance. The judge said, overruled. Sit down, counsel. And Nora Bishop said, ma'am, it felt like the cheapest thing that's ever happened to me. Why? Because I've been in 25 years, she said, and I've had 4 things broken, and I've been shot once, and I've had a boy die 11 meters above me, and none of it ever cost as much as standing at parade rest for 4 months in front of children who thought I was a liar. And I want the court to understand that I could have stopped it any day. Any day. All I had to do was say one true sentence, and I'd have had the whole building. And I didn't say it, ma'am, and I'm not a good person. And I want that on the record, too, because I didn't stay quiet out of honor. I stayed quiet because I was afraid that if I opened my mouth for me, I'd lose the right to open it for him. The courtroom was silent. For whom, Sergeant? For Sergeant Aaron Vance, Nora said. United States Army, Dayton, Ohio, killed in action, 5th of October, 2019. Kunar Province at 9,000 feet at 08:19 in the morning, holding a ridge he'd been ordered to leave because they were wounded below the crest and he would not go. And in the third row, a woman named Margaret Vance, 67 years old, who had driven 11 hours from Dayton because a command sergeant major named Elias Ward had found her number and called her himself and said, "Ma'am, I'm nobody, but I think you should come," made a sound that everybody in that room would hear for the rest of their lives. The court-martial lasted 9 days. Grant Whitlock testified for 4 hours and 11 minutes on the fourth day and did not look at his father once and answered every question and did not hedge one syllable. And when the defense asked him why he was doing this to his own father, he said, "Sir, I'm not doing anything to him. He did it. I'm just the one saying it out loud, and I'm 4 months late, and I'm going to be late for the rest of my life." Specialist Anna Rennick testified for 20 minutes about an extra duty nobody wanted. Sergeant Marisol Reyes testified about a green notebook with 4 words in it in somebody else's handwriting. Staff Sergeant Marcus Cade testified about a memo he wrote on a Sunday that ended his career, and when the defense tried to impeach him with it, he said, "Sir, yes, I did that. That's the whole point of me. Why do you think I'm up here?" Sergeant Major Douglas Petrelli testified about a mat bag with a word stenciled on it. Private First Class Daniel Kessler testified about 26 seconds. And Command Sergeant Major Elias Ward, 39 years, testified for 11 minutes and said one thing that made it into the transcript that people would still be quoting in 10 years, which was, "Sir, I've been in this Army since 1987, and I have never seen a general officer beaten by anything except a specialist doing an extra duty nobody wanted, and I'd like the court to write that down." Brigadier General Marcus Whitlock was convicted on all counts. 6 months after that, in a small ceremony, in a small room with 14 people present, and no press, the record of Sergeant Aaron Vance was corrected. Margaret Vance got a new packet. It had a transcript in it. The transcript said, "Negative. We have wounded below the crest. We are holding until they're up." And under it, I acknowledge the order. I'm not going to comply. Send whatever you have to send. Margaret Vance read it 4 times in that room, and then she put it in her purse, and she stood up, and she found the woman standing at the back who had not sat down and did not have a name in any of it. "You're her," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "You called me in 2019, and then you didn't say anything." Nora Bishop stood there and, "Yes, ma'am." 6 years. "Yes, ma'am." "I called you 200 times, Margaret Vance said. 211, ma'am." Margaret Vance looked at her for a long moment. "You counted." "Yes, ma'am." And Margaret Vance, 67 years old from Dayton, Ohio, reached up and put both hands on the face of a 45-year-old woman with no name and no record and no shadow box and nothing at all in a drawer and said, "Thank you for my son." There is no roster with her name on it. There is no school she can point to. No packet, no drawer, no box on a wall for anybody's grandchildren to open. There is one page and it says nothing, and it will say nothing when she dies. But at Fort Brantley, in a combative school in Georgia, they teach it her way now. And every soldier who walks onto that mat gets told the same thing on the first day by a staff sergeant named Cade, who lost 14 years and stayed anyway. The loud one is never it. Breathe through your nose. And when somebody tells you the paper is the person, you look them in the eye and you tell them, no, she never got her record back. She got something better. She made sure a boy from Dayton got his.